Finally! Oh, it's taken a long time, but I'm just about finished. Just gotta touch up a few things here or there, add some music, and we'll be good to, Oh, look, a new Nintendo Direct! I wonder what we got coming up in the next couple...
英雄伝説空の奇跡 The First は2025年発売。
So our game opens, as many do, with a prologue, where we find a young girl pacing around her house. This is our protagonist, Estelle Bright, and she's waiting for her father, Cassius Bright, who's apparently a bit late. But well, it doesn't take too long before Cassius does return.
Nanako, I'm home! And so's this strange man I brought from work.
Yes, for whatever reason, her father is clutching a person wrapped in a blanket. It's a boy, just around the same age as Estelle, and he looks pretty seriously injured. She questions who this mystery boy is, and apparently Cassius doesn't really know. He just found him like this and decided to take him home. Anyways, they lay the boy down in a bed, and before long he finally awakens. However, sadly, he can only speak in damaged anime boy cliches. You should have left me there to die, and all that. Estelle, however, is having none of that. Good girl. And with a few well-placed elbow drops, manages to get the boy to stop his whining. With the boy now thoroughly confused on what the hell's going on, the girl introduces herself as Estelle Bright and asks the boy for his name in return. The boy opens his mouth to reply, and we get the opening cutscene. His name's Joshua. Anyways, as the game proper begins, we find that some years have passed since the prologue. Estelle Bright and Joshua Bright are now in their mid-teens. Apparently, Cassius adopted the boy, and so Joshua and Estelle have been living in the same house as adoptive brother and sister. So, as you might expect, the two have grown quite close over the years, as Joshua seems to have moved past the brooding, damaged anime boy persona. Although he does still play a harmonica and stare wistfully out over the horizon every now and then. Regardless, our two leads head downstairs to enjoy some breakfast with Cassius, where it is revealed that today is actually a very important day, as today is the day that Estelle and Joshua shall take their test to become Junior Bracers. What's a bracer, you ask? Well, I think the technical definition is that it's an international organization designed to help out citizens in whatever they may need. But what that help entails seems to vary wildly. Sometimes it's dealing with powerful monsters, but also sometimes it's just, like, finding a kid's lost doll or something. I don't know, in this world could you, like, hire a bracer to move a sofa for you, or babysit your dog or something? Whatever. The point is it's a well-respected occupation built around helping those in need. In fact, Cassius himself is a bracer too, and it looks like his kids are set to follow in his footsteps. You scarf down your breakfast, say goodbye to your father, who asks you to pick up the newspaper for him on the way home, and our game can truly begin in earnest. What follows is essentially a tutorial of the game's mechanics, but also our introduction to the world where the Trails games take place in. Let's start small with our protagonists and the town that they reside in. Estelle Bright is a confident, outgoing, action-oriented girl, backed up by an incredibly sunny disposition that makes her almost impossible to hate. She is, however, to put it charitably, kind of an idiot. Joshua, on the other hand, is in many ways the opposite of his adoptive sister, reserved, calm, and exceedingly logical. However, his cool, straightforward persona hides a surprisingly kind demeanor. That being said, he has a tendency to be rather negative. Anyways, the town they reside in is known as Rolent, a quaint little place residing to the northeastern corner of the country of Liberal. The town is small enough that Estelle and Joshua know basically everyone in it on a first-names basis. There's the mayor, the shop owners, the priest, a couple random street urchins, several kids their age that they went to Sunday school with, and of course their teacher at the Bracer Guild, a woman named Scheherazade. We'll talk more about her later, but basically she's one of Cassius Bright's proteges and has been teaching Estelle and Joshua everything they need to know about being bracers. Finally though, let's talk about the nation itself. Liberal is, like Rolent, a small, quaint little country. It's known for having a mild and hospitable climate, some very beautiful vistas, and being fairly high-tech, at least compared to its neighboring nations. However, its neighbors are also quite a bit bigger than Liberal, and in fact, a little over a decade ago, Liberal was locked in an all-out war with one of these nations. That being the nation of Erebonia, situated to the north of Liberal. And let's just say that ever since the war, tensions between the two nations have been particularly tense. Okay, well, with all that backstory out of the way, Estelle and Joshua meet with their teacher Scheherazade in order to begin whatever test awaits them before they can become junior bracers. And well, the test turns out to be going into a sewer and retrieving an item from a chest. With the many flies and, sheep demons that are apparently roaming our local sewers dealt with, you return the items to Shara. Thus, you are granted the rank of Junior Bracer, officially bringing you into the Bracer Guild. After a bit of celebrating, you say your goodbyes to Shara and make to return home to tell Cassius the good news. But wait! He also asked you to pick up the paper for him, didn't you? So you go do that. However, when you pick up the paper, you bump into the receptionist from the Bracer Guild who just got some worrying news. It seems a pair of the town's local urchins ran off towards the giant monster-filled tower that is about a 5-minute walk out of town. Don't know why RPG towns always seem to build next to those. Anyways, she was going to look for Shara to take care of the problem, but apparently she can't seem to find her. Well, this is exactly what our training has been building to. Estelle states that there's no time. We must go save those poor children ourselves, and even Joshua agrees that time is of the essence, we might as well go do it. So, that's what you do. You head off towards the tower, hoping to catch the kids before anything truly horrible can happen to them. And you do just that. Barely, because when you get to them, you already find the kids surrounded. Fortunately, Estelle and Joshua are just able to engage the beasts in time while simultaneously keeping the kids safe behind them. However, after the initial battle is done and it looks like all is clear, a monster neither Estelle nor Joshua had noticed manages to get the jump on her. Estelle braces for the worst, but before that can happen, a blur shoots out across the screen, striking the monster dead, and leaving Estelle and the children completely unharmed. It's Cassius, who apparently heard about the missing kids, and his kids being the ones going to investigate it, and came as fast as he could. So Cassius is probably one of the more enigmatic characters in this game, as we really don't know that much about him initially. It's clear from the way everyone talks about him, though, that he's an incredibly powerful and well-known bracer, possibly even one of the very best bracers in the entire world. Although, for whatever reason, Estelle, and only Estelle, seems to know nothing about this. Oh, he's gonna be a deadbeat Fire Emblem dad like Grail or Geralt, isn't he? You know, one of those guys that doesn't tell their kids jack squat even though just knowing something would be super helpful. Yeah, whatever. Let's push that load of personal opinion aside and get back to the story. Cassius berates his children lightly for getting a bit sloppy at the end, though offers some praise as well. Estelle and Joshua can only really sheepishly nod, as they did need to get bailed out by their father, but they did learn a lesson, so all's good in the end. With the children now safe, the lot of you return to the town. Cassius returns home alone, while Estelle and Joshua head to the Bracer Guild to fill in the receptionist on everything that happened. However, as you make to leave the Bracer Guild and finally return home for the day, the receptionist remembers something she almost forgot. Apparently, a letter addressed to Cassius came to the Bracer Guild earlier that day, and she asks if you can deliver it to your father, which, of course, you agree to. So you return home, hand the letter over to your father, and prepare for a well-earned meal. However, during the meal, it is revealed that the contents of that letter kind of bring down the mood. Apparently, someone has requested Cassius' services, and he's going to be gone for a fairly long time, possibly close to a month. It seems pretty sudden, but Cassius reassures Estelle that it's just a routine inspection that he has to go through being a bracer. Although it's hard to imagine that that's the full extent of it, but when has lying to your child ever backfired? Regardless, Cassius does indeed leave the very next day, but before he does, he gives the two of you several bracer jobs that he was going to deal with, stating that they should be easy enough for us to handle, and will be a great way for Estelle and Joshua to improve their standing as junior bracers. So Estelle and Joshua say farewell to their father. I'm sure he's going to be back in the storyline before you know it. Now, well, you don't really have much better to do, so you set about completing the tasks Cassie has left for you. The first involves going to a nearby farm, where they've apparently been having some monster problems. Namely, some mystery monsters have been eating their crops and spooking their livestock at nights. So, Estelle and Joshua end up spending the night at the farm as they wait for the monsters to arrive. Of course, like I said before, this is a small town, so they basically know everyone in the farm family already, and while we wait, we get to have a bit of character building for our protagonists. Estelle hangs out a bit with the farmer's daughter, who basically spends the entire time talking about how dreamy Joshua is. Estelle better be careful or some thieving harlot is going to up and steal him away. Yeah, so, I guess somewhat unsurprisingly, over the years they've lived together, Estelle and Joshua have started to develop feelings for one another. Though the whole them being adoptive siblings thing makes it kind of weird. But hey, I've played SMT too, I've seen weirder relationships. Regardless, on the surface at least, it looks like Joshua has a light crush on Estelle, but isn't really planning on doing anything about it, while Estelle has feelings for Joshua, but hasn't really pieced together that they are romantic yet. In any event, Estelle's little moment of girl talk is put on hold when the monsters they were tasked with stopping show up. So the two of you deal with them, easily enough, and find out that they're nothing more than a cute little family of, ferret, cat, chipmunk things. The point here being that they're so cute, Estelle wonders if they really do need to kill them. After all, they were just a couple of creatures looking for food, and they only really damaged the vegetables. And now that we've kicked their asses, they're probably going to think twice before they come back here. Joshua, however, is not on board with that idea. They came to do a job, and there's no telling if these monsters will come back if we spare their lives. We need to deal with them here and now. But the farmers step in and agree with Estelle, saying that they'll hope the monsters learn their lesson, and will also set up some more preventative measures to stop them from being able to come back. With that, it's late, so everyone heads back to the house to enjoy a nice long night's rest. But as Estelle and Joshua arrive in their room, Joshua starts to mope, his negative side really coming out. He wonders if he truly has become a heartless beast. He was so ready to wipe out those monsters that it took the entire family chipping in before he realized there might be merit in sparing the creatures' lives. Joshua starts to wonder if he's broken. An empty husk, with no heart to love, no real emotions to speak of, an empty, pointless marionette dancing to the tune of— Okay, enough of that! We've been over this a million times! No more damaged anime boy cliches! Estelle does what Estelle does best and becomes the emotional support that Joshua needs at this point, telling him that she refuses to ever accept him calling himself broken. He is Joshua, and he will always be important to her. Joshua is finally able to cheer up thanks to Estelle's encouragement, and the two share a nice moment before turning in for the night. The next day, you say your goodbyes to the farm family and return to the proper city of Rolent, ready to tackle the next of Cassius's requests, which involves a request from the mayor himself. Again, small town, so Estelle and Joshua do know the mayor personally. He wants you to retrieve a large chunk of septium from a local mine, which is basically this game's fakey magical resource that runs everything through these special technological objects called orbments. See Materia from FF7 or Blastia from Tales of Vesperia for similar examples. Anyways, this chunk of septium is rather valuable, so Estelle and Joshua must be sure to guard it carefully. The two of you head to the mine, and after a bit of searching, manage to find the mine foreman and acquire the septium from him. But just as you do, a sudden loud noise and heavy shaking rumbles through the mine. The foreman explains that it was probably a cave-in, but before you can investigate for sure, a monster jumps from seemingly out of nowhere and attacks your group. After quickly dealing with it, the foreman explains that there's a possibility that if a cave-in did happen, it may have accidentally opened a pathway into a monster den, which is apparently a thing that can happen in this world. Regardless, that's worrying news, so you and the foreman head off to try and save any other workers that were working on this lower level of the mine. Fortunately, due to your quick thinking, you are able to find all the workers that were supposed to be down here, as well as one more, a apparently new recruit who should not have been this deep down the mine at this point. When questioned why he was in a place that he wasn't supposed to, the new recruit explained, no, I wanted to see what the senior workers were doing down here. Yeah, that'll work, before running off in a panic. Well, that was obviously nothing. Anyways, despite the scare and a few scratches, everyone in the mine is perfectly fine. It'll take some work to steal off the monsters again, but that's a problem for later. Right now, the important thing is the chunk of septium is completely unharmed, safely kept in Estelle's clutches. So you return to Rolent to hand the septium over to the mayor. But when you arrive, you find that the mayor is actually entertaining someone else. A young lady, apparently from one of Liberal's more prestigious schools, named Josette. She seems very kind, proper, and polite, but Estelle and Joshua wonder if they should wait for her to leave before they present the mayor with the septium. The mayor, however, brushes their worries aside. There's no reason why we can't show this in front of Josette. Apparently, the reason he acquired the septium was to give it as a gift from Rolent to the Queen of Liberal. Her birthday is coming up in about a month's time, and the entire nation will be celebrating it in one big festival. He also makes sure to put it in this very secure safe. This safe, this one right here, where no one can possibly get to it. It's that one, remember? Well, job complete. Glad we'll never have to deal with that again. Let's move on to the third and final task Estelle and Joshua's father left for them. Namely, it involves escorting a pair of journalists. The head journalist, a scruffy-looking, slightly sexist guy named Neil or Niall, and its photographer, a very airheaded lady by the name of Dorothy. Niall is pretty upset that the Bracer Guild sent over a pair of teenagers to be his bracer escort, especially when he was expecting the legendary Cassius Bright to be his escort. Get used to characters being disappointed that you're not Cassius, by the way. Anyways, after some wacky shenanigans, the reporters reveal that they want to head to that tower that you went to earlier. You know, the one where the kids ran away to. Apparently, they want to climb to the top and take some photos from there. They had planned on interviewing the famous Cassius Bright as well, but sadly, they are left with only his children. So that is where you go, round and round the spirally tower until you reach the top. Also, just as an aside, the two reporters can't fight, but do get put in the battle as civilians that you have to protect. But the fun part is the photographer can sometimes blind enemies with the flash of her camera, which I just wanted to touch on because I think that's kind of adorable. I love it when games have little touches like that. Regardless, you eventually arrive at the top, but when you do, you find there's someone already there. A older guy wearing glasses named Professor Alba. He claims he's been researching these towers for quite some time. You see, apparently there are a number of similar towers like this one dotting the land of Liberal, and each of them houses some strange ancient technology like this that's defunct but seemingly still operational, but nobody knows how to use it. Anyways, introductions aside, the reporters go out of their way to do whatever little investigation and photo taking they were planning on doing, and Joshua and Estelle are given a moment alone. However, Joshua claims that he's feeling a little under the weather. I mean, ever since we got to the top of this tower, he has been rather quiet, so... Well, Estelle gives him a moment to cool off, and has a few interesting but ultimately unimportant conversations with the other members present. Eventually, the reporters finish up whatever it was they were doing, and Joshua seems to recover from his wooziness. A lot of you offer to escort Professor Alba back to Rolent, which he is all too happy to take you up on, and a lot of you head back, mission once again successful. After saying your farewells to the reporting duo, you return to the Bracer Guild to report your success at all the missions finally being complete. There, you find not only the receptionist, but also Scheherazade, who apparently finished up some of her own missions. They congratulate you on successfully finishing your father's missions. Shara even offers to take the two of you out for drinks, and pulls, what we in the industry like to call the Kawakami gambits. But before we can get into some more hilarious misunderstandings, the mayor bursts into the Bracer Guild with a distressed look on his face. Apparently, he was just robbed! Oh no, what possibly could have been stolen from the mayor? Of course, it turns out the Septium Shard was stolen, and after a bit of investigation, you're pretty easily able to deduce that it was probably the girl that stole it. I mean, she was the only other person who knew where the Septium had been stored, so... Estelle and Joshua, now being escorted by Shara, set out to stop that dastardly no-good crook from getting away with a stolen jewel. You head for the airline dock, Josette's most likely means of escape, but find that the flights are being delayed for whatever reason, and more importantly, the attendant had not noticed anyone matching Josette's description. So obviously our crook couldn't have escaped via air, at least not through official means of travel. You head back into town, weighing your options on where she could have gone, but as you do, you notice that reporter pair hurriedly making for the town's west exit. Apparently, something big has gone down in the neighboring region of Bose, and since the flights are out of commission, they're heading there on foot to get the scoop. Huh, well that does sound interesting, but it has nothing to do with your predicament right now. We still need to figure out where our little burglar could have got to, and that is when Estelle remembers a little piece of evidence she found during her investigation. A leaf that is normally only found in a small forest to the south of Rolent. It's not much, but it's all we have to go on, so the three of you head there to see if you can't flush out our little escaped thief. And wouldn't you know it, it turns out your intuition was exactly right, because in that very forest is a group of bandits, being led by none other than that girl you met pretending to be a student, Josette. You eavesdrop a bit on the bandits and find out that they're part of a group known as the Capuas, a well-known bandit group in the region. They also make sure to go out of their way to talk in great detail about how dumb and unattractive Estelle is. Oh, these antics will be the death of me. Regardless, you decide to make your presence known at this point, and a fight is all but inevitable. Fortunately, Estelle and Joshua have gotten pretty tough at this point, and the three of you rather promptly kick their asses. Josette and her crew are forced to drop down in defeat, and Estelle is able to retrieve the Septium safe and sound. However, as you prepare to start taking these criminals into custody, a skyship appears from seemingly out of nowhere, laying down a rain of suppressing fire and forcing her party away from the defeated Capuas. Seeing her chance, Josette and the rest of her crew quickly jump onto the skyship, which is apparently being flown by her brother, and fly off, leaving you behind in the dust. But not before swearing that this isn't the end! You hear me? This isn't the end! So sadly, the criminals escaped and there was little you could do to stop them. But at the very least, you were able to recover the stolen items, so you return to the mayor and report everything that happened. After everything is explained and all things are put in reasonable order, you return to the Bracer Guild ready to call it a day. It certainly has been a long one, but it looks like Joshua and Estelle really do have what it takes to be proper bracers. The receptionist pulls out a pair of papers and hands one each to both Estelle and Joshua. It is a pair of recommendations. Essentially, for a junior bracer to become a bracer proper, they need to receive a recommendation from every bracer branch within a nation. And so, with this, we have received an official recommendation from the town of Rolent. Sure, it's only just the beginning right now, but they've made a powerful first step in their journey. Why, if old Cassius could see us now, I'm sure he'd be, After the receptionist gets off the phone, she turns to the three of you, a pale look on her face. Apparently, a rather famous airliner has disappeared somewhere over the Bose region. It's unclear what happened to it, but it should have landed, and it didn't. But that's not all there is to it, because it also turns out Cassius Bright was aboard that very ship. We cut to later that night. Estelle has been locked in her room ever since the news of her missing father dropped, and Joshua and Shara aren't really sure what to do about it. However, it turns out their worries were kind of for naught, because it isn't long before Estelle shows up at the dinner table in her usual bubbly mood. When asked what she was doing in her room all day, she simply states that she was packing. I mean, after all, they are gonna head out and rescue their father, right? Shara and Joshua both look at each other incredulously before sharing a smile. It's hard to believe they were even worried in the first place. Of course Estelle's going to be fine. Joshua quickly agrees to go with Estelle in her quest, and even Shara opts to join them, since she was previously one of Cassius's students, so she sees it as part of her duty to go and rescue her old mentor. So it looks like the three of you are headed for the Bose region, or Bose region, I'm definitely going to screw up the pronunciation of something in this game, to find out whatever you can about the missing airliner, and of course the whereabouts of Cassius Bright. You head to the Bracer Guild, as Shara needs to sort out a few things before she's allowed to leave, so Estelle takes the opportunity to ask Joshua to come with her to the lookout tower, standing in the middle of town. It's a somewhat newer building to the town. There used to be an old tower in its place, but it was destroyed during the war with Erebonia. And well, Estelle brought Joshua here to tell him a story she hasn't had the chance to yet. That this was the place where her mother died. When the siege had been pressuring Rolent some 10 years ago, a 5 or 6-year-old Estelle had gone to climb up the tower to get a better view of what was going on. However, the tower was an obvious target for the Erebonian weapons, and it was very quickly obliterated. Estelle's mother, Lena, had in the nick of time managed to reach Estelle before tragedy could strike, and was able to shield her daughter from any harm the debris might cause. Lena was not so lucky, and she ended up dying from the injuries she sustained, saving her daughter. Joshua is at a loss for what to say at the tragic tale, but Estelle just smiles gently at him. She claims that the reason she came up here wasn't to lament the past or anything. It was simply to ask her mother to give her the strength necessary to save her father. The two share a tender moment at the top of the tower. Anyways, with the heavy stuff out of the way, and Shara now finished with her business, the three of you say goodbye to the town that has become such a large part of your lives, and head off to lands unknown. The Bose region is around about a day's walk from where you are now, and has a variety of monsters to potentially delay things further. Still, it's a fairly uneventful journey for you. Along the way, you bump into an acquaintance of Shara's, another member of the Bracer Guild on a mission of his own, escorting some cargo from Bose to the royal city of Grancell. He gives you a simple greeting and wishes you luck in your quest, however suggests that looking into the disappearance of the airliner might be more difficult than it would first appear. However, he doesn't really tell you much more than that, so I guess we'll have to find out at the next Bracer Guild what he means. Sure enough though, it is not long before you finally arrive in the city of Bose itself. After a brief look around the various shops and restaurants the place has to offer, you head for the Bracers Guild and meet with the local receptionist to see what exactly is up with this missing airship. And well, the receptionist informs you that he doesn't really know either. Unfortunately, a man named General Morgan, Captain Morgan's uptight, straight-laced older brother no doubt, is heading the investigation. And apparently he's famously anti-Bracer. For whatever reason, the man seems to hold a deep grudge against the organization. As such, while the investigation on the missing ship is supposed to be a joint effort between the army and the Bracers, the army has basically left the Bracers entirely out of the loop. Still, it's not all bad news, because it turns out there might just be a request for the Bracers that somewhat involves the missing airship. The mayor of Bose has apparently been also getting the cold shoulder from the army and has made an official request with them. Since you showed up and are looking into the whole thing, and Shara already has a proven track record as a well-respected Bracer, the receptionist opts to give you the job, asking you to go meet with this mayor to get some details on what she wants. So, after a couple wacky antics in your quest to find her and a couple very necessary side quests, you meet with the surprisingly young mayor, who seems excited to meet with you. She claims that, just like the Bracers, the town of Bose has mostly been left in the dark on what exactly happened to this missing airliner. And well, since all the flights in Bose have been grounded while the army investigates, let's just say it has been affecting the city a fair amount in terms of commerce. So she wants you to go and gather info on what exactly the army has found out, and is willing to provide her name and, more importantly, the backing of her station in order for you to get it. Which is perfect for us, and a deal is quickly reached. With the mayor's seal of approval in hand, you make your way to the army's nearest outpost, one sitting on the border between Liberal and Erebonia. However, considering this Morgan's known vitriol against the Bracer name, it would probably be best if you kept your profession on the down low, although Estelle's not thrilled about that. Eventually, you arrive at the outpost, only to find that the general is currently occupied, and you'll have to wait a little bit before you get your chance to see him. With no other options, you decide to wait it out at a bar stationed within the base, and that is when you meet, what I can only describe as an extremely bisexual man. Good for him. Regardless, after a short little talk with the guy where he mostly hits on Joshua, your group are informed that General Morgan has returned, so you head off to meet with him. Surprisingly, despite his reputation, the general is exceedingly hospitable towards you once he finds out you're here on the mayor's behalf. It seems he knows her personally and is more than willing to share what he can to help alleviate any worries the mayor might have. Glad to finally be getting some answers, you press him for what info he has, and he claims that in fact the missing airliner has been found. Sort of. They don't know the actual physical location of the ship, but they know who has it. And it's a name that's familiar to us. the Capua family bandits have issued a ransom for the ship and its passengers. Yes, that group that tried to rob the mayor of Rolent seemed to be the ones behind this missing airline. However, Morgan does note that it is odd. The Capuas are a well-known bandit group throughout Liberal, but they've never really resorted to tactics like this. They're usually more of a steal from the rich, give to themselves kind of group. Things like hostage-taking and trying to extort a ransom from the crown are far heavier crimes than anything they've done before. It is quite the revelation, so much so that Estelle is unable to keep her mouth shut for more than a few moments, and quickly gives away that we had already had a run-in with the Capuas. From there, it's not too hard for General Morgan to piece two and two together and finally realize that you are in fact bracers. Upon this revelation, his entire demeanor changes, and he transforms from the hospitable, well-mannered old man we'd previously been talking to into a brash, angry son of a bitch. He can't believe bracers would resort to such underhanded tactics. He knew that organization was corrupt down to its core, and he calls for his guards to have you thrown out of the building. At this, Shara starts to get pretty pissed and starts to fire back at the general about how the bracers and army are supposed to be working together on this, and how it's his fault that they've had to resort to such tactics to glean something. The argument starts to really heat up between the two of them to a somewhat worrying degree. Technically speaking, the bracers are kind of operating outside the law, and a conflict with the army could be a really big deal. Fortunately, however, that is when someone appears to break the tension.
Look, up in the sky! It's a bird!
It's a plane!
It's bisexual man! It's the guy you met at the bar. After his live performance, the tension in the air is irrevocably broken, and the army simply returns to their building, unsure what to think about that. Your group stand up to meet with this strange man that you've only had one conversation with, and he introduces himself as Olivier, a traveling bard from Erebonia looking to sample Liberal's culture and many fine foods. Your party are unsure what to make of him, but agree that him jumping in to defuse the situation was probably for the best. So, in thanks, you offer to escort Olivier back to Bose with you, where you plan on reporting your findings to the mayor. Olivier happily agrees, and the lot of you make the short trek back. Once there, Olivier quickly separates from your group, looking to see what sort of sights Bose has to offer, and your party bid him farewell, somewhat relieved to be free of such an eccentric individual. With that done, you head off to the mayor's manor. There, you see a pair of familiar faces being kicked out by the mayor's maid. It's those reporters, Neil and Dorothy, you helped back in Rolent, looking to get an up-close and personal interview with the mayor. Purely for journalistic reasons, of course, and not because they want to get the mayor's sexy young figure on the cover of their newspaper. Regardless, the two of them are sent away dejected just before you arrive, but the maid is happy to see your return. You relay all the info you were able to glean to the mayor, and she is thankful, even if it wasn't the whole story. But still, that leaves you in a bit of a pickle. You want to keep investigating, but the army is blocking you from being able to do that, at least directly. So, after thanking the mayor and collecting the reward for her request, you consider how you might be able to drum up some info that slipped past the army's notice. And well, you figure, why not ask that reporter guy? After all, we have some pretty juicy info ourselves that maybe we can use to bargain with him. You find Neil drowning his woes at a local tavern and eventually manage to persuade him to share what little info he has on the missing airship. However, he's only really able to give you two pieces of info. First, a child in a nearby village reportedly saw a shadow flying through the night sky. However, apparently the army did investigate that rumor, but found nothing of note in the area. The second piece of info is that the intelligence division is on the move under the command of a man named Colonel Richard. Apparently, the intelligence division is a fairly new section of the army, but already renowned for being quite the elite force. And Colonel Richard himself is no slouch either. Still, it doesn't seem like that info is particularly useful at this point in time, so you decide to devote your attention to the rumor of a flying shadow. It ain't a lot to go on, and like Neil said, the army had already apparently investigated it, but it is literally all you have to go on. So, after giving the reporter the news about the Capuas being the ones behind the ship's disappearance, you make for the small village to hear what the child has to say. Along the way, however, you bump into yet another acquaintance of Shara's, another bracer, this being a redhead by the name of Agate. Like pretty much everyone you've met on this journey, he is, of course, familiar with your father, and acts pretty dismissively towards Joshua and especially Estelle. But outside his prickly introduction, he doesn't really say too much and simply walks off, leaving a bad taste in Estelle's mouth. Though Shara does note that behind all that, he is actually a very skilled bracer. Well, I'm sure we'll find out more about him later. Let's move on to this village. After a bit of asking around, you manage to track down this kid with the supposed rumor. He tells you that one dark night, as he happened to be staring up into the sky, he saw 2 dark shadows flying over the village headed north. This actually tracks if you think about it, because if the airliner had been abducted by sky bandits, obviously the bandit ship would have been close by to escort it. So maybe this lead really does have some merit to it. Still, the army didn't find anything of note, so it's tough to say without looking for ourselves. So that's exactly what you do, and a lot of you head north into the winding, cliff-filled valley north of the village. Unfortunately, however, the area is exceedingly open, so the idea of hiding an airship here seems almost impossible. In fact, the only thing of note in the area is this giant abandoned mine. But I mean, that thing hasn't been touched by the villagers in decades! If there were bandits hiding in there, then they wouldn't be found at all. But, like, come on, it's not big enough to store an airship. I mean, there definitely would be room for an airship in there, but, you know, it's not like they, Oh my god, it was inside the abandoned mine! God, the army fucking sucks at their job or is being led astray. Regardless, the ship is here, and sure enough, so are the Capuas, as you immediately recognize Kyle, the older brother of Josette, who had swooped in via airship to rescue her during your previous encounter. After listening in on the bandits' conversation for a little bit, the 3 of you eventually jump out, ready to take those sons of bitches into custody. The bandits are obviously very surprised to see you. However, Kyle makes a rather odd remark, stating, "You weren't supposed to be here yet." Huh. Well, anyways, you assume your battle positions, and the bandits reluctantly charge back. Unfortunately for them, even fighting 5v3, the bandits are no match for your amazing bracer fighting skills, and they are quickly brought to their knees. However, as you move in to fully apprehend them, Kyle produces a small canister from behind his back and manages to produce a blinding smokescreen, giving him and his crew an opportunity to escape. God damn it, they got the slip on us again! But at the very least, we did manage to at least salvage the airliner itself. Your group do a quick survey of the ship and find it has already been completely stripped of most valuables, and more importantly, the passengers are nowhere to be seen. The bandits must have been using this mine to hold the ship and move the crew and cargo in smaller bunches back to their real hideout. Which does mean that wherever their true hideout is, must be a fair bit smaller than this mine, and incapable of holding such a large airliner. Which I guess is some kind of lead, but it still brings us back very close to square one. You exit the airliner, pondering what your next move should be, but as you do, you find a squad of soldiers waiting for you? Yes, it turns out the army had actually planned to redo their investigation of the area, and a platoon of soldiers, led by General Morgan himself, arrived just in time to find your little party exiting the airliner. The recently emptied airship with no bandits in sight, while you're being confronted by the man who thinks bracers are the root of all evil. Oh god, we're going to jail. The army immediately arrests you, Morgan himself claiming that it's so obvious that those filthy bracers would be working with common bandits. You try to plead your case, but there's not really a lot you can do right now. You certainly aren't about to start a brawl with the goddamn army. So you're brought away and thrown inside a jail cell, with your interrogation being left for early the next day. Meaning, your party gets to spend a night in jail. It certainly is frustrating. You want to continue your search for the runaway bandits, but obviously that isn't an option right now. So instead, you take the time to ponder what exactly is going on. The most important thing you talk about is that line that Kyle dropped just before you fought, the "you're not supposed to be here yet." The way it was phrased, and the fact that the army showed up only a short while after you did, makes you think that Kyle probably mistook you for members of the army initially. And well, if that's the case, then that means means the Capuas probably have a mole hidden somewhere within the army, which means any chance they have of finding anything of import with regard to the bandits is pretty unlikely. As you ponder what to do in this delicate situation, a voice from the cell next door suddenly rings out. A very familiar voice. The voice of a man who doesn't let a silly thing like gender get in the way of who he is or isn't attracted to. Yes, it's Olivier! Apparently, he stole a very expensive bottle of wine, although he claims that he was merely taking it as payment for his musical services. Regardless, your party spend a long night being forced to listen to his long, rambling tale. However, as morning draws and you await your interrogation, you are instead greeted with some good news for once. A guard shows up at your cell door and tells you, you're free to go. Behind him appears the general walking next to the mayor, who apparently came to bail us out. General Morgan claims that the mayor filled him in on exactly what happened, as well as telling us that he too is apparently good friends with Cassius Bright. Because, of course, he fucking is. You're going to very quickly find out that this entire nation lives and breathes Cassius Brights. Anyways, he has apparently met Estelle once before, although she would have been far too young to remember that. So before becoming a bracer, Cassius actually worked in the army alongside General Morgan, and it's actually kind of implied that the reason why General Morgan hates bracers so much is because Cassius left the army to become one? Oh no, Cassius-senpai no longer looks at me. In any event, thanks to the mayor's intervention and your father being so gosh darn wonderful, you're free to leave the prison cell, the suspicions against you being completely dropped. And the mayor even opts to let Olivier go as well, as the bottle of wine had belonged to her and she finds him interesting enough that she's decided to forgive the transgression. Wouldn't we all? So the lot of you head to the mayor's manor to fill her in on everything you know, and try to figure out where exactly these bandits' true hideout could possibly be. Luckily for you, the mayor claims that there may actually be a lead on that side of things. Apparently, last night, there was a rather large-scale robbery in the southern district of Bose. The army is currently investigating it, but there's a very high likelihood that the robbery itself is linked to the Capua family bandits. So the mayor suggests you investigate it to see if any clues pop up, and also hires Olivier to go with you for whatever reason. So you head off to investigate what you can. However, once you arrive in the southern district, you find that the army is already there in full force, and they are less than willing to help out a couple of bracers. It seems like the good general's hatred for bracers has rubbed off on the foot soldiers, cause they pretty much bar every attempt you do to try and gather info from the local residents. But as that's going on, a new face appears to provide you with some surprising aid. A sharp-dressed blonde man questions what the soldier is doing. The army and the Bracers Guild are supposed to be working hand in hand on this case, and yet they are preventing bracers from getting the necessary information? It turns out this guy is Colonel Richard, the young up-and-comer from the intelligence division Neil had told us about earlier. And well, it seems he shares none of the general's disdain for the Bracer Guild. Thanks to him, you are finally given the chance to investigate what exactly went on last night. Guess not everyone in the army is not quite so hard-assed. Oh, also, Neil shows up to try and weasel an interview out of the colonel. Neat. After a bit of digging, you eventually find out that the bandits were sighted near a small tavern where a lot of local fishermen spend their free time. So, of course, that is where the four of you head. You arrive and quickly find the man who witnessed these bandits, and he tells you that he actually overheard two of them talking. Apparently, they're coming back here later tonight. Well, isn't that a lucky coinky-dink? Regardless, it looks like you have a lead, but there's not really a lot you can do until they actually get here. So your group decide to relax at the tavern until evening arrives. Shara and Olivier head to the bar in order to have a bit of a drinking contest. Meanwhile, Estelle and Joshua opt to head outside, where Estelle decides to try out the local fishing, as apparently she's a decent fisherman. And so time drifts on by, until the sun is just starting to set on the horizon. Estelle, having been absorbed in her fishing the entire time, looks up to find that Joshua has disappeared on her. She does a little lap of the grounds, and eventually finds him standing alone on a pier, staring out wistfully over the quiet lake surface. Estelle asks what he was up to while she was fishing, and Joshua replies that he was just lost in thought. Estelle quickly notices that he's once again trying to disguise his feelings through being overly polite, so she tackles the problem like she always does, head on. She's known Joshua for 5 years now, after all. She can tell when he's trying to hide his feelings. She may not be able to fully comprehend what exactly the problem is, but she wishes Joshua would trust her enough to at least lean on her when he's struggling. Joshua is slightly taken aback at how easily Estelle was able to read his mood, so Estelle asks if he can play her a piece on his harmonica. After the bittersweet melody comes to an end, Joshua stares off for a moment before asking Estelle something that's clearly been weighing on him. Why hasn't she asked him about his past yet? 5 years ago, her father came home with some beat-up kid in his arms, and Estelle just accepted him into her life, with nary a question about who he was or how he ended up like that. How can she be so okay with that? Estelle, however, doesn't have to think on her response for very long. She states that the two of them made a promise, didn't they? As long as Joshua promised to tell her one day about his past, she would never push him on it further until he was ready to open up about it. And well, quite frankly, they've been together for 5 years. Even if she doesn't know everything about him, she knows who Joshua is. He's a ridiculously competent loner who loves books and weapons. He's kind and fair with everyone around him, but always politely pushes them away from getting too close. He's always there to lend an ear to Estelle's worries and turn her around if she ends up wandering down the wrong path. He's the same Joshua she's always known, so of course she doesn't feel the need to press him about something he clearly doesn't want to talk about. It's a very touching moment, honestly. Joshua is clearly moved by Estelle's kind words, and the two are happily able to regain their old dynamic. Having reconciled, the two of you head back into the inn to meet back up with Shara and Olivier, only to find Olivier passed out stone cold drunk, and Shara absolutely unfazed.
Can I get you anything else, man?
No thanks. I have to get back to rehab.
She's in rehab!
So you rent out a room where Olivier can hopefully nurse the mother of all hangovers. However, it turns out that this may have been a deliberate plan by Shara to stop Olivier, a civilian for all intents and purposes, from getting too involved with these bandits. Anyways, the time of the bandits' arrival is fast approaching, so the three of you take up positions to begin something of a stakeout. And sure enough, before long, a pair of familiar figures appear near the tavern's entrance, Josette and Kyle. You, of course, take the opportunity to eavesdrop on our thieving friends and find out why exactly they came back here. At first, you don't find out too much, although it does look like Josette and Kyle are kind of apprehensive about the whole ransom thing. It seems like there's been a bit of infighting between them and their older brother, a man named Dawn. Regardless, as you continue to listen, Joshua suddenly notices something appear on the lake's surface. It's a boat, and it makes its way silently over to the pier Josette and Kyle are standing on. On it are a pair of individuals in strange dark armor you've never seen before. The two parties begin to talk, and some interesting information is divulged. The men in black tell Kyle and Josette a number of things regarding the actions of people in the capital, as well as the army. It looks like this is how the Capuas were getting info about the army's movements, although it's unclear who exactly these men in black are, and how they've managed to get high-level military secrets. Still, it looks like we've learned about all we can from listening in on the Capuas, but what do we do now? We could try and apprehend Josette and Kyle right now, but there's a good chance their airship would just appear once again to bail them out. So instead, you decide that the best course of action would be to go and find the airship itself. If they're here, the airship has to be parked somewhere close by, and dealing with it will severely hamper the Capua's movements. You scour the area surrounding the tavern, and sure enough, before long, you find a clearing in the woods where sits the Capua's airship, along with a handful of Capua bandits guarding it. The three of you begin to plot on what the best course of action would be in this situation, but your musings are interrupted by Olivier, who apparently can handle his alcohol better than any of you expected, though he did apparently vomit up quite a lot of it. Anyways, it's a little late to just shoo him away, and Olivier offers an idea of his own. why not simply stow away? And so, before long, Josette and Kyle return, the bandits pack up, and the airship takes off. Only, there's a few more passengers on board than the bandits realize. Eventually, the airship lands, and we finally have access to the bandits' true hideout. After the crew disembarks, our party remove themselves from their hiding places and get ready to teach these sons of bitches a lesson in pain the old-fashioned way. After dealing with a couple small groups of them, who were completely caught off guard by our arrival, the four of you overhear some voices coming from a room off the main path. You check inside, expecting to find more bandits, but instead find the passengers and crew of the missing airline. Oh my god, here they are! Estelle and Joshua quickly ask where their father is. Is Cassius Bright safe and sound? Only for the captain of the ship to remark, Cassius? Oh yeah, wasn't he that guy who took off right before we disembarked? Wait, what? Yes, it seems old Daddy Dearest was not actually on board the ship when it was abducted. He had left minutes before the ship took off, and, well, the ship itself hadn't been able to report that fact because it was abducted. So, that means you have no fucking idea where in the seven hells Cassius could be, but unfortunately you're kind of in the middle of a situation right now, so you can't really dwell on it too long. You focus your attentions back on the bandit stronghold. You tell the passengers to sit tight while the four of you head off to deal with the last remaining bandits, the heads of the Capua family themselves. And sure enough, before long, you find the boss's room, wherein sits Josette, Kyle, and the third Capua sibling we have yet to meet, Dawn. He seems like a pretty ruthless, cold-hearted individual, as he even suggests that killing the hostages is a favorable outcome for them. A sentiment Josette and Kyle don't seem to wholeheartedly agree with. But it doesn't matter this time. You have them cornered now. There ain't no airship to bail them out this time. Estelle, Joshua, Shara, and Olivier all march into the boss's room, ready to lay down some bracer justice. As you might expect, an all-out brawl breaks out, and while the three Capuas working together are certainly tough, they're no match for the four of us. Before long, Estelle delivers a finishing blow, and Don Capua is sent flying back into a bookshelf. However, as he groggily pulls himself to his feet, he suddenly begins to act differently. He seems confused by what the heck is going on. He's even surprised to see Josette, claiming he didn't realize she'd returned already, even though he'd just been talking to her not 5 minutes earlier. Not only are your party unsure what to make of it, but Kyle and Josette seem equally as surprised by his odd turn in behavior. Did he hit his head really hard or something? I mean, it's obviously mind control or memory erasing or some shit, but we'll pretend we haven't played other games before. Taken aback by the odd behavior, your group are offset for a moment, and Kyle sees his chance. He pulls out a smoke grenade. God, who are these people? Fucking Strega? In the confusion, the Capuas once again manage to escape. But you're not letting them get away this time. Your group give chase as quickly as you can to try and catch up with the fleeing Capuas. Unfortunately for you, the grunt bandits you defeated earlier are back on their feet, and while they know they can't defeat you, they throw themselves at you in order to buy their leaders a chance at escape. Which means by the time you get back to the dock, the Capuas have a massive lead on you. Are they really gonna manage to slip through your fingers yet again? You rush up the stairs, turn around the corner, only to find, a group of soldiers arresting the Capuas. Leading the troops that have just appeared inside this dock is that Colonel Richard fellow, and he's also got Dorothy and Neil following him. He claims that the intelligence division had been tracking the Capua's position for a while now, but the reason why the operation had been so successful was largely due to our infiltrating the place first. He gives each and every one of us a personal thank you before heading off to go rescue the civilians, as well as dragging the Capuas into custody. Huh. Well, your party is kind of at a loss for words. I mean, on the one hand, it's good that the criminals have been caught, and it's great the civilians will finally be free from this whole ordeal that they had to go through, but, you kinda can't help but feel like the army just sorta stole your thunder? Oh well, in the end it's a bracer's job to see this sort of thing through to completion, and in that regard, you did admirably. Your party returned to the Bracer Guild in Bose to report everything that happened, and finally put a close on this whole chapter. Once back, the receptionist tells you that, despite the fact that you're junior bracers, you did an amazing job. Sure, maybe the army took the credit, but there's no denying that the people would not have been rescued without our help. We've done the people of Liberal a huge service this day, and he would be honored to give us a recommendation of the Bose branch. It's a good feeling. We really did save the day here, but that doesn't change the fact that there's still a few questions hanging in the air. Like, what's up with Don Capua's sudden change in personality? Or how was the Army's intelligence division so easily able to follow their actions? But most importantly, what the hell happened to Cassius Bright? Okay, so he wasn't on the ship, so he wasn't in any danger, but then where the hell did he go? Why hasn't he been in contact with us at all? Did something even more—
Telegram from Miss Estelle.
Okay, so apparently now that the ship has been rescued, there was some cargo aborted that was meant to be delivered that never did, and 2 of them are packages that bear Cassius's name on them. One is a letter, which is sent from Cassius and addressed directly to Estelle and Joshua, and the other is a unknown package that was just addressed to Cassius himself and has no return sender. You thank the delivery man, and quickly the 4 of you head upstairs to inspect what this all could be. You decide to check out the letter first. Inside, Cassius basically explains that something urgent came up and he was forced to change missions. As such, he won't be returning home until at least the Queen's birthday in 2 or 3 months' time. Still, he wishes Estelle and Joshua the best and hopes that they'll continue their bracer training. Your group muse on what it is that could have been so important for your father to just disappear like that, and you don't really come up with anything. What could it be that it has to be so secret that he can't even tell those closest to him? Well, thinking that you deserve some answers, your group also decides to check out that package that was sent to Cassius. Normally, Estelle and Joshua wouldn't dream of opening their father's mail, but in this case they figure that any clue it might give on their father's whereabouts would be worth it. Inside the package, they find, a black thing. It appears to be an orbment, but it's not quite like any orbment the 4 of you have ever seen. There doesn't appear to be any way to open it, and it's got a rather odd shape. Olivier points out that it may actually be an artifact, which is basically an orbment, but created by an ancient super advanced civilization that lived thousands of years ago. God, if I had a penny every time one of those showed up. Anyways, underneath the object, you find a short note that reads, "I was able to secure the item the aforesaid group was carrying, so please take care of it. Please ask Professor R to do an analysis of it when you can. Signed, K." That's, not a lot of info to go on, and Shara is stumped on who exactly K or Professor R could be. At this, Estelle starts to get fed up. After all this searching, all this digging and diving and butting heads with the army and whatever, they've basically arrived back at where they started. They have no idea where their father is, and the only hint is a weird black lump and a note that could refer to just about anyone. Why does her father have to be so goddamn mysterious? Doesn't he realize how worried his family is? At Estelle's sudden but understandable outburst, Joshua decides to chime in. He suggests, why don't we take this opportunity to continue our bracer training? As I stated, we need to receive a recommendation from every major bracer branch across Liberal if we want to become full-fledged bracers, so why don't we go and do that? And heck, along the way, we could use our spare time to look into this Professor R, or see if we can find people who recognize this black thing. It's unclear where Cassius is, he may not even be in the country anymore, but at the very least, going out and improving our own situation has to be better than just sitting around and worrying if dear old dad is actually okay. And well, Estelle is ecstatic at the idea. They'll be looking for their dad, following their dreams, and learning about the world all in one go. Basically, the perfect plan, and Estelle's gloomy mood quickly evaporates. We cut to the next day, where it is revealed that Olivier and Shara will not be accompanying us on our quest. Shara has business to get back to in Rolent, and Olivier wants to continue his travels, planning to check out what sort of local cuisine Rolent has to offer. He gives Shara a heartfelt goodbye, wish Olivier luck in all the drinking he'll be forced to do in Shara's presence, and watch as your former teammates fly off into the distance. So, after a brief look into Sharon Olivier's voyage, where we find out that Olivier is probably a little bit more than just a lowly traveling bard, although I think we probably figured that out already, we return to our dynamic duo where they get ready to set off on their brand new journey. In this case, we'll be heading to a place known as Ruan, a coastal area known for its scenic vistas and beautiful weather. It's going to be a long trip though, the longest you'll have to take between any two towns, so the two of you prepare as best you can. Your first stop will be a military checkpoint that sits on the border between Bose and Ruan. The journey itself is uneventful, but takes about a day's time. Once you arrive, you find that, going against your previous experiences with the army, the soldiers stationed there are actually very hospitable, and are quite happy to have guests stay the night. However, as a bit of a twist of fate, it turns out you'll be having a roommate for the night, and it just so happens to be someone you've met before. It's that red-haired bracer with the shitty attitude you met that one time, AItSF. And just like before, he seems rather dismissive of Joshua and Estelle's presence. But you're just sharing the room for the night, so you both opt to put your differences aside for the time and settle down for an evening of rest. However, as the night draws on, a loud alarm bell awakens the three bracers. It seems something has alerted the guards at the checkpoint. The three of you rush outside to see what could have caused this commotion, and find the guards locked in battle with a rather large pack of monsters. Of course, this being your forte, Estelle, Joshua, and AItSF all opt to help out where they can, and it's not too long before the monster presence is driven off. That being said, the attack itself was kind of odd. It seemed a lot more organized than a typical monster attack normally would be, but whatever, there doesn't appear to be any remaining threat and nobody was seriously injured, so you decide to let it go for now. Although AItSF does actually seem to somewhat recognize Estelle and Joshua's skill for the very first time, so I guess we got something out of it. Regardless, the next morning you wake up to find that AItSF has already ditched. As enigmatic as ever it would appear. You say your thanks to the guards for the night's lodgings and food before continuing on your quest. As always, it involves a lot of walking and the odd monster encounter. Eventually, the two of you arrive in a small little village known as Minoria, which is only about a half-day's journey away from Ruan itself, meaning you're pretty close to your destination. So you visit a local inn and order some of the local cuisine, looking forward to whatever you might get. As you wait for your food, you bump into a young girl, seemingly close to Estelle and Joshua's age, with a frantic look on her face. Estelle's natural helpful nature kicking in, the pair of you ask the girl if there's something wrong, and she claims that she's looking for a young boy in a cap, and asks if we've seen him. Sadly, no we haven't, so the girl politely thanks you for your time and continues on her search. Well, you'll keep an eye out for the boy, but for now, you return your attention to your lunch. And so, Estelle and Joshua get to enjoy some lovely food with a beautiful view. After it's all finished, and Estelle has dutifully teased Joshua about thinking that girl was cute, you begin to make your way back to the main road and continue on your journey. But, as you do, Estelle accidentally bumps into a small boy walking in the opposite direction, wearing a cap. Hey, what do you know? This is probably the kid the girl was looking for. You tell the kid that this purple-haired girl was looking for him, and he thanks you for the tip-off before running off to meet up with her. However, as he does, Joshua notices something. Estelle's bracer badge is missing. But I mean, she definitely still had it on her when she was eating, so did she leave it at the bench, or... Oh, that punk-ass little bitch! Steal my badge, will you? Estelle charges after the boy, with Joshua trying to keep up, until you finally manage to track him down. He's at a small but cozy-looking building on the outskirts of Minoria, and there you find the boy talking with a couple other kids, around about his age. Estelle, not wasting any time, charges at the boy, and, a verbose debate of two intellectual minds meeting breaks out. By which I mean a Scooby-Doo chase happens. Anyways, Estelle demands that the boy hand back her bracer badge, but before she can administer the spanking he deserves, that purple-haired girl we met before steps out, and it turns out she is a goddamn attack falcon. There's a little bit of confusion, but before long, the girl realizes that you're actually the two people she met back in the village, and your two groups begin to figure out how this all came to be. This is, I guess unsurprisingly, an orphanage run by a woman named Matron Teresa. She comes out not soon after you arrive and gets the boy, who's apparently named Clem, to return the stolen badge. The purple-haired girl is named Chloe, and she's living at a nearby boarding school, but often visits the orphanage during her free time to help out. In any event, Estelle and Joshua sit down with the matron and Chloe to explain their side of the story, and it doesn't take too long for everything to get smoothed over. After a delightful afternoon afternoon of tea and pie with the two of them, you say your goodbyes to the matron and continue on your journey. Chloe is actually headed in the same direction as us, so decides to accompany you, even agreeing to show us around the town a bit once we arrive. Like those reporters before, Chloe herself doesn't actually fight, acting as just an NPC, but she does heal your party if they get hurt, which is pretty neat. After a short trek along the oceanside path, eventually you finally arrive at your destination, the city of Ruan. As you might expect of a tourist destination, the town itself is gorgeous, full of some breathtaking architecture, beautiful skies, and an absolutely stunning oceanside view. Anyways, you quickly pop into the Bracer's branch located here, only for a local Bracer named Karna to inform you that the receptionist is out and won't be back for a little bit. So, Chloe decides to take this opportunity to give you a little tour of Rouen while you have the chance. Estelle and Joshua are happy to take her up on the offer, and you get to enjoy some scenic vistas like the fancy drawbridge, or the local park, or the, warehouse district, wow, 2 whole locations and a loading zone. This place really is a tourist destination. Jokes aside, as you examine the warehouse district, a trio of oddly dressed individuals come out and pretty openly start hitting on Chloe and Estelle. The girls obviously make it pretty clear that they aren't interested, but the guys don't let up. As you try to shoo them away, 2 men, one older, one younger, appear and request that the ruffians stop harassing Ruan's citizens. However, their request goes unnoticed, and it's not until the hooligans notice that you're bracers that they finally do relent and back off. It turns out the 2 men who tried to help you are in fact the mayor of Ruan and his assistant Gilbert, an alumnus from Chloe's school. They tell you that that group is known as the Raven Gang, and they've become quite the headache for the region, harassing a number of visitors and causing all sorts of mischief. Regardless, the mayor apologizes for what happened before heading back along his way. The 3 of you guess that you've probably passed enough time as well, so head back to the Bracer branch where, sure enough, the guild receptionist has returned at last. You get your introductions and paperwork out of the way, and are officially welcomed into the Rouen branch of the Bracer Guild. Apparently, Rowan's a little understaffed at the moment in regards to bracers, so they're very happy to have your help, which is good news for us. For now, however, it's getting late, so you decide to head for the local hotel to get a decent night's rest. Chloe says her goodbyes at this point, as she needs to get back to her own dorm, but you'll likely see more of her as you spend your time in Rouen. You head inside the hotel, looking to see if there's any rooms available, and, lucky for you, there just so happened to be a last-minute cancellation in one of the hotel's most extravagant rooms, meaning we might actually get to sleep in a pretty decent room for once. However, as you admire all the wonderful modern conveniences the room has to offer, your door is suddenly pushed open and a rather portly man with a child's haircut barges into your room. When the 2 of you confront him, asking what the heck he's doing in your room, the man claims in a haughty tone that this room appeals to him, so the 2 of us had better leave, for he is Duke Dunnan, nephew to the Queen herself. Estelle and Joshua openly laugh in his face, but a much kinder looking older man, probably the guy's butler, somewhat exasperatedly appears behind the guy and sighs that yes, indeed, he is the Queen's nephew. The butler pulls the 2 of you aside and offers a rather large sum of money, apologizing profusely for the Duke's behavior and asking if we could take this money and hand over the room peacefully. Estelle and Joshua start to piece everything together, realizing that this is just some spoiled rich asshole in the royal family, but end up feeling sorry enough for the long-suffering butler that they let him have the room free of charge. I mean, would it really have hurt to take some of the money? Whatever. That means that we are once again without a place to sleep. Fortunately for you, however, it turns out Neil, that reporter guy, is also staying at this hotel. And well, he offers to share his room with you, which you're all too happy to accept. So you get to spend the evening catching up with Neil, who thanks you once again for your tip-off back in Bose. You also get to learn a little bit about this Duke Dunnan from him. Namely, that he's got a decent chance of becoming king once the Queen steps down. You see, the Queen's son died some time ago, so the only ones left with a right for succession are Duke Dunnan, her nephew, and Princess Claudia, her granddaughter. However, they're both not exactly great options. Claudia's too young to lead yet, and Dunnan is a spoiled man-child, so Well, that was some fun world building. You while away the night with Neil, and before you know it, it's the next day. You say your goodbyes to the reporter and head off to the Bracer Guild to find out what your first job in Ruan will be. The receptionist greets you, but just as he's about to give you your marching orders, a call comes in, and it's not great news. Apparently, the orphanage you guys visited yesterday was burned to the ground last night. Fortunately, the orphans and matron weren't badly harmed in the fire and are currently being taken care of in the nearby village, but it is still obviously distressing news. As such, it looks like your first job here is going to be investigating this burned down building and seeing if you can't figure out what happened. You rush back to the orphanage as quickly as you can, and sure enough, the place is a smoldering wreck. You investigate the best you can, but there isn't exactly a ton of stuff to look at. Still, Joshua is able to deduce one thing from the heavy smell of lighter fluid wafting around one section of the building. This fire was no accident. Almost certainly, this was a case of arson. And just in time to hear this proclamation, who should appear but Chloe, who had rushed over from the school the moment she heard the orphanage had burned down. Apparently, the matron and her late husband had been like a mother and father to Chloe, and she feels she owes a great many things to them. So she begs you to bring her along, while you investigate who could have caused this fire. More than anything, she just wants to know why someone would do something so terrible. Joshua and Estelle give each other a bit of a glance, obviously hesitant to just allow a civilian to come along with them, but eventually agree that Chloe is close enough to all this that she does have a right to know what happened, and so you decide to let her tag along. Your next stop, logically, is to head to the nearby village and check in on the matron and kids, and hear what they have to say on what happened during the fire. After checking in with him to make sure that they really are all okay, Chloe leads the kids away to go eat, while Estelle and Joshua sit down with the matron to get the whole story. You inform her that you think that this was probably arson, and the matron isn't really too surprised by the revelation. She's usually very thorough on her safety around the orphanage, so she didn't believe that it was possible that an accident could have caused this. But, that being said, she has no idea why anyone would do this. She can't think of a single motive to do something so heinous. However, she does have one surprising bit of info for us. Apparently, the reason why nobody was hurt in the fire isn't because they managed to escape before it got bad, but because some silver-haired man apparently appeared, broke into the building, and escorted a lot of them out before anyone could get hurt. How odd. Joshua seems taken aback by the mention of silver hair, perhaps something from his past, but quickly brings himself back to reality when Estelle presses him for info. Joshua states that regardless of who this guy is, considering he risked his neck to go and save all these orphans, he probably wasn't the one who actually started the fire, so we can probably afford to not worry about him until later. Just then though, as you're musing about this weird silver-haired man, a knock comes at your door and in comes Chloe along with, surprisingly, the mayor of Ruan and his assistant. He offers his deepest apologies to the matron and asks if we have any leads on who may have done it. Once again, you tell him you have no real suspects at this point, but the mayor's assistant weighs in that perhaps it was those ruffian hooligans that we encountered yesterday, the Ravens. They're always the cause of all of Ruan's troubles. However, the mayor does give him a stern talking to about blindly accusing with no proof. It doesn't lead anywhere. After that, the mayor turns attention back on Matron Teresa and offers her a proposal. He claims that he has an unused villa in Grancell, the royal capital, and that, should the orphanage need it, he would be willing to let the matron and all the orphans live there, rent-free, while the rebuilding process gets underway. It is a very generous offer. After all, the matron definitely does not have enough money to start a rebuilding effort of the orphanage. She is going to have to rely on the kindness of others. But it would also mean a big relocation for the matron as well as the orphans, a notion that Chloe is rather sad to imagine. So, since it's such a big decision, the matron asks for some time to think it over, to which the mayor is happy to oblige. After that, he takes his leave, and Joshua and Estelle and Chloe decide that it might be best to begin our investigation as well. However, as you make to leave, one of the orphan girls runs up to Chloe, a look of desperation in her eyes. It looks like that troublemaker Clem has run off again, although this time seemed different than all the others. He had a wild look in his eyes, and was shouting something about making them pay for what they did. It doesn't take long for the three of you to figure out that Clem had probably overheard the conversation we had had with the mayor, and when the mayor's assistant had accused the Ravens of burning it down, perhaps Clem took that as fact. So the three of you are forced to rush back to Ruan to try and stop this little idiot from getting himself killed. After a bunch of shenanigans involving the drawbridge and a boat, you manage to make it to the Ravens' hideout just in time to see little Clem getting into some serious trouble. The street toughs seem to mostly ignore Clem at first, but eventually he becomes annoying enough that they actually start to get pissed off. Chloe, done standing on the sideline, whips out a rather impressive rapier and reveals that she's been a fully trained swordswoman this entire time and just doesn't enjoy fighting. And sure enough, as the fight with the dockside hooligans breaks out, it turns out she can more than handle herself in a combat situation. After a good and honest thrashing of those street punks, a voice from behind you orders you to stop. You turn and find out that the voice came from AItSF again. Jeez, we can't seem to stop running into each other, huh? Anyways, it looks like AItSF has something of a loose connection with the Ravens, and he steps in, promising that he'll make sure they pay for what they did. But you know, in more of a tough guy, bros punch their own bros, bro kind of way. Anyways, the three of you quickly hurry out, Clem now dutifully following with you. The street thugs certainly aren't very kind, but it seems pretty unlikely they're the ones who started the orphanage fire. They're more about posturing than just being evil-hearted villains who burn down orphanages. After returning Clem to the matron safely unharmed, and Joshua giving him a touching piece of life advice, you head to the Bracer Guild to figure out what to do. Unsurprisingly, you once again find AItSF there, having finished up his little row with the Ravens. What is surprising, however, is what AItSF tells us next. He's taking over the arson case, and the two of us can no longer get involved. It catches a lot of you a bit off guard, and Estelle begins to protest, but AItSF quickly shuts her up. He claims you're too close to the case, and worse yet, you involved a civilian in your investigation. So he's taking over, and seeing as he's a full-fledged bracer and you two are simply junior bracers, there really isn't a lot you can do about it. And with that, AItSF just up and leaves. Well, fuck, what do we do now? As frustrating as it is, you can't really argue with his points, so now you're kind of out of a job. But it turns out Chloe might have an idea that could help us out. Perhaps because she feels a little guilty for her involvement being part of the reason AItSF kicked us off the case, she asks if it would be okay if we helped her with a job of her own. You see, her school is about to launch its annual school festival. It's a big event that will attract all sorts of people from across Liberal. And well, it turns out Chloe and the student council she's a part of are going to be hosting a play during the festival, and they've been needing some people to fill in for a few key roles. So Chloe asks if, as bracers, we would be willing to help out with their school festival, which apparently we can. The bracer job description really can entail fucking anything, can't it? Well, it's not like we had anything else to do. Still, high school, huh? I wonder what a high school is like in this world. It could be interesting to look into, Is that Blue Archive music I hear? Oh, I'm pretty sure I know what this means then. Okay, so yeah, we're going to enter into a fairly long section of mostly character development, so let's summarize, shall we? At the school, Estelle and Joshua will be taking part in a play that tells of an old legend passed down through the years and connected to this world's religion. It's not really that important to the whole story, but here's the gist of it. Two longtime friends, one rich, one poor, fall in love with the same princess. They hold a duel to decide who shall win the hand of said princess. The princess herself steps in to stop the fighting, only for the two men to accidentally kill her in the process. And then the, princess is resurrected by an ancient god to, teach them all a lesson, I guess? You know, typical stuff. Regardless, that's the play you'll be putting on, so you meet with a couple other students in the student council who will also be setting up the play. The president and the vice president. They too are not really all that important, but they're there. Anyways, in a wacky turn of fate, it turns out the play will have a role reversal of sorts, so Estelle and Chloe will be playing the role of the two duelists, while Joshua will play the role of a princess. With that, the day starts flowing by. Estelle and Joshua spend most of their time practicing their roles, as well as getting to experience just a little bit of what high school life is like, something they never actually got to experience. This is also the part of the game where Estelle finally starts to realize that thing that's been hanging over her head this entire time. That what she thought were familial feelings towards Joshua might actually be deeper.
That young man fills me with hope, and some other emotions that are weird and deeply confusing me.
So yeah, that's the general tone for this part of the game. Eventually, the day of the festival does arrive, and you finish preparing for your play. You spend the most of the actual day exploring the campus and running into a bunch of familiar faces who came to see the festival for themselves, such as Neil and Dorothy, the mayor from Bose, and even that researcher, Professor Alba. Joshua also thinks he sees someone sporting silver hair, perhaps hinting toward that strange man who saved the orphans, but isn't able to get a solid lock on him, so nothing really comes of it. Regardless, eventually the play itself begins, and Estelle and Joshua get to put forward everything they've been working towards over the past week. And, well, in the end, the whole thing goes off perfectly, leading to the end of a successful school festival. With the play concluded, you head backstage to bask in a job well done. There, you are visited by the matron and orphans who had been in attendance and very much enjoyed the play you put on. You catch up with them a little, glad to see that they're doing alright since the fire, but your little reunion gets interrupted by something surprising. And it turns out to be pretty good news, actually. The headmaster, along with the student council president, appear and hand Teresa an envelope. You see, the school festival has always traditionally given a portion of its profits to a charity of some kind. And well, thanks to the festival's success, the headmaster, student council, mayor, and several other important people figured the money should absolutely go towards the rebuilding of the orphanage. Meaning, the matron and the orphans won't have to leave Ruan after all. Aww, doesn't that just warm your heart? With that, the day comes to a close. The matron heads back to the village along with the orphans, with Karna acting as their escort. You know, you can never be too careful. As for Estelle and Joshua, well, their little look into an ordinary school life has finally come to an end. They say their goodbyes to the student council president and vice president before returning to Ruan. Chloe offers to walk you back to town, which you're happy to take her up on. However, as you're just leaving the school grounds and make your way onto the main road, a panicked civilian rushing from the direction of the village runs into you. He exclaims that Teresa and the orphans were just attacked by an unknown assailant. You instruct the man to go inform the Bracer branch in Ruan, while the three of you head to the village to assess what exactly happened. There, you find the matron and Karna alive, but unconscious. The orphans have to fill you in on what happened. A bunch of men in black masks jumped out from nowhere, surprised the group, got the upper hand on Karna through sheer numbers, and stole the money. That's actually very worrying news. This doesn't sound like some ordinary mugging. This was a planned attack, and they definitely knew about the donation money if they went through with it. But the number of people who actually knew of that donation money's existence, much less Teresa was the one holding it, it's pretty small. Your thoughts are interrupted, though, by a brash but familiar presence. It's AItSF, who had rushed over as quick as he could the moment he heard of the attack on the matron. You fill him in on everything that happened, and you all quickly come to the agreement that there's a good chance that whoever attacked the matron this time is probably at least somewhat related to the arson at the orphanage. So, AItSF plans on tracking down the thugs who did this, but, unlike before, he is willing to let Estelle and Joshua tag along this time. He is, however, hesitant to allow Chloe to come along, but when it's revealed that her pet falcon has managed to track down the attackers, he basically has no choice but to let her onto the team. The hawk leads your party to an old lighthouse sitting on a cliffside, and, well, you find that the door is unlocked and there are signs of recent activity here. You enter the building only to find, standing in your way, the Ravens gang. Are you serious? Those guys really were behind all this? Well, it turns out there's probably more to it than meets the eye. It's pretty clear that the Ravens are not fully cognizant of what they are doing, perhaps suffering something similar to what Dom from the Capua Bandits did, some sort of mind alteration or mind control. Still, that doesn't mean that they aren't standing in your way, so once again your party is forced to face off against this gang of hooligans. There are quite a lot of them, but eventually you manage to knock a lot of them out and make your way up to the very highest part of the lighthouse. Once there, you hear the sound of voices, which appear to be coming from three men. Two of them are wearing black armor, a very familiar looking black armor at that. It's the same guys who were tipping off the Capua Bandits about the army's movements back in Bose. But next to them stands one of the true masterminds behind this fiendish attack on the orphanage, the Mayor's Aide.
I'm the Mayor's Aide. Table for 2, please.
Ooh, the plot's slightly thickens. I mean, there are like 5 suspects at most, so you get pretty decent odds even with a stab in the dark. Regardless, you listen in as you overhear the mayor's sinister plan that the aide has been carrying out. You see, the mayor burned down the orphanage because it was in the way of new expensive housing real estate. That filthy old wooden cabin would have ruined the view of huge cash settlements.
Beat it, kids! Come back when you got connections!
Oh my god, the main antagonist of this region is a fucking Care Bears villain. Well, no matter how cliche it might be, it's time for you to whoop some ass. You jump out from hiding, catching the men in black and the mayor's aide by surprise, and prepare to see just how far you can shove those spiky black helmets up their asses. The men in black themselves are, to their credit, quite a lot stronger than any enemy you've faced so far, but it's still not enough. Eventually, your group stand victorious, but it doesn't last for long. The mystery men decide to play dirty. The moment they lose, they turn on their former employer and threaten to kill the mayor's aide if we don't let them go, and it doesn't look to be an idle threat. Caught in a standstill, you are forced to watch as the crooks slowly sneak over to the window, but the moment they try to make a break for it, AItSF chases after them. Estelle tries to follow suit, but Joshua stops her, stating that it would be better for us to report into the Bracers Guild about everything that happened. Also, bring in the mayor's aide as well as all the unconscious ravens. Estelle is annoyed at this, but eventually relents and agrees that AItSF can worry about the men in black while we concentrate on getting the mayor. So you head back towards the guild. But just before you get back to Ruan, Chloe stops and says that she needs to quickly go and grab something from the school. She tells the two of you to keep going ahead, she just needs to grab it quickly, and then she'll meet up back with us at the Bracers Guild once we've reported everything. Odd, but Estelle and Joshua have no real reason to question it, so they keep going on their way. However, as Estelle and Joshua walk off, we see that she is actually using this opportunity to write a letter to someone. Anyways, back with Estelle and Joshua, you fill in the receptionist on everything that happened last night. Unfortunately for us, the Bracer Guild sort of operates outside the law because, well, the Bracers are an international organization. They aren't really tied to the government. Because of that, they can't really interfere with actual government things unless there's a very good reason for it. So, without any hard proof that the mayor is the one behind all this, it'll be hard for the Bracers to really go in and do anything to a political figure like him. Still, what they can do is inform the military of everything they found out and hope that they take action in our place. So a plan is devised. Estelle and Joshua will head to the mayor's manor to stall him for as long as they can, and maybe suss out a little more evidence that might indict him. You prepare to set off, meet back up with Chloe, and the three of you go to enter the mayor's manor. Also, Neil shows up for some reason. He senses a story, I guess, and follows you as well. Anyways, inside, you find the mayor is actually in the middle of entertaining a guest. It's that boorish nobleman, Duke Dunnan, who stole your room a couple nights ago. The mayor seems to be trying to convince the man to buy some real estate in Ruan. Some brand new real estate that might just have opened up, huh? Anyways, the mayor is shocked at you barging into his room, but he doesn't quite seem to have realized that you've figured out that he's the one behind everything. A roundabout conversation follows where your group try to ask a few leading questions to see if the mayor won't, accidentally spill some more dirt on himself, but eventually the cat is out of the bag. The mayor, now realizing he's been found out, decides to resort to his secret power move that he's been saving for just such an occasion.
Inbred dinner wolves! This is what I'm talking about! Embarrassing!
How the hell did he get those? Well, no matter, they're here and we have to deal with them. At the very least, this is flat-out aggression, so now Estelle and Joshua do have a reason to arrest the mayor. He did attack them. So you have a back-and-forth brawl with the large pups, and eventually they both keel over, leaving nothing standing between you and the filthy, no-good, greedy mayor. You make to subdue the man, but before you can, he pulls an item from his pocket. Ah, crap. For whatever reason, the mayor apparently has an ancient artifact that allows him to literally freeze time around your party. I mean, I'd call some fucking BS hacks on that bullshit, but it's too late. We're trapped now. The mayor produces a gun from his pocket and gets ready to deal with the intruders that are bugging him. Yes, an attractive dark-haired boy. He seems like the perfect starting place. So, somehow, not really sure how or why, that weird black artifact that was sent to your father, that Estelle has been keeping in her pocket this entire time, seems to react to the mayor's artifact's power and starts glowing itself. And after emitting a bright light, it completely manages to negate the power that artifact had over your party. Huh. Well, I guess it takes one Deus Ex Machina to defeat another. The mayor, seeing an opportunity, dashes for the exit while the rest of you are still regaining your bearing. Your party give chase and arrive just in time to watch as the mayor speeds off in his getaway boat. Fortunately for you, there just so happens to be a second boat nearby, so the three of you quickly pile inside and give chase. You're able to gain some ground, sea on the mayor, but unfortunately, as you head out into more open waters, his besailed ship starts to gain the advantage and slowly starts to eke out a lead. Damn it, is there really nothing we can do? I really don't think the army's just gonna show up out of nowhere again to bail us out, do you, Oh, that's exactly what's gonna happen. A speedy-looking airship, clearly belonging to the military, touches down and completely cuts off the mayor's escape. The airship turns out to belong to the Royal Guards of all people, an elite group of soldiers who serve the Queen of Liberal directly and led by a woman named Lieutenant Julia Schwartz. But for the Royal Guards themselves to show up, and so quickly too, especially after just one message from some local bracer guild, it's almost like they were tipped off earlier or something, but who could have done that? So yeah, it's pretty clear that Chloe has some sort of connection to the crown where she's able to summon the Royal Guard, although Joshua and Estelle are yet unaware of it. Anyways, after the mayor is safely detained, you get to meet with the leader of the Royal Guards, Julia Schwartz, who thanks you for your effort in helping to expose the mayor's corruption. The man is clearly irredeemable, but it does actually look like there's some evidence that his memories might have been tampered with a little, similar to that of the bandits and now the Ravens. That's more and more instances of memories getting tampered with. There's something going on behind the scenes here, but it's difficult to say what it is at this point. We also have a run-in with Colonel Richard and his second-in-command, Almathea. It turns out that they were the ones the guild actually contacted, but by the time they arrived, they already found the situation under Royal Guard control, so... Still, he congratulates you on your effort and thanks Captain Schwartz before leaving, promising to deal with the mayor in the appropriate way. Miss Schwartz herself decides to take this opportunity to leave as well, as the ship they traveled here on is top of the line and somewhat of a military secret, so they can't just hang around. You say your goodbyes and return to the Bracer Guild to finally wrap up this whole situation. Unsurprisingly, the receptionist is waiting for you with a pair of recommendations. Meaning, you've successfully done your part for the Ruan branch. Woohoo! You take this opportunity to start piecing together everything that happened that you weren't really able to figure out in the middle of the chase. For starters, you ask if there's any news of Agate's chase of the Men in Black, and, well, it looks like he's still in pursuit, although he claims to have the situation under control. The receptionist informs you that, actually, the reason Agate was so invested in those guys in black is because Cassius Bright specifically asked him to investigate them. Oh, god damn it, I was enjoying the long stretch of time where we didn't have to hear Cassius's name. Well, it looks like at the very least he's on their case, even if you don't know where he is. But if you ever bump into him again, you'll be sure to help him out. Anyways, there's another lingering question still hanging in the air that needs answers. Namely, that strange happenstance involving the Black Orbment. How it randomly reacted to the mayor's artifact, and how you still have no idea what the heck it is. Well, after filling the receptionist in on everything surrounding the Orbment, he tells you that you should probably have it checked out in the next town over of Zeiss. You see, Zeiss is rather famous for being the center of orbment research, so there's a decent chance that if you want to find out anything about the Black Orbment, you'll find your answers there. And well, I guess that means we're heading off once more into lands unknown. Chloe is sad to see you go, but understands that this is what you have to do, and promises to see you off with a smile. And with that, our chapter within the coastal city of Ruan finally comes to an end. Almost. Just before we close things up, we get a small glimpse at AItSF. He's hot on the trail of those guys in black and is fully ready to kick their asses. However, before he can apprehend them, a man in a similar suit of armor but with a red tinge appears before him. It's the same guy that we saw talking with the Capuas. AItSF tries to single-handedly deal with the guy, but the man in red doesn't really fight back, but is very easily able to give him the slip, leaving our redhead swordsman alone, confused, and absolutely furious. And so it's on to the next chapter. Chloe escorts you to the edge of the region, wanting to stick with you as long as possible. It's a bit of a sad goodbye with a good friend you've made here, but it isn't the last time you'll meet. Chloe tells you that while she has to stay in school for now, she will be visiting the capital during the Queen's birthday celebration. And well, since you do need to visit every town in Liberal to become proper bracers, there's a decent chance you'll be in the capital around that time as well. So the three of you make plans to reunite then. With that, you say your goodbyes and prepare to enter the next stage of your journey. In this case, the path between Ruan and the new region of Zeiss is one long tunnel traveling through a mountainside. Compared to the previous trek between Bose and Ruan, it's quite a bit shorter, but it's going to be much more treacherous terrain you're passing through. As is basically a custom at this point, the path is littered with any number of cave-dwelling monsters, but outside of that, not a whole lot happens. You make your way through the tunnel and eventually arrive close to the entrance to Zeiss. However, just before you reach your destination, you bump into a very small girl who seems to be in quite the hurry. As you try to apologize, the girl quickly asks if either of you has seen any lights flickering along the passage you just came down. Estelle can't really recall any, but Joshua claims that in fact there was one that he noticed. The guy certainly has an eye for detail. Seemingly overjoyed at the revelation, the girl thanks you for the tip-off before charging into the depths of the tunnel. Estelle and Joshua look at each other for a moment before realizing that they really should go after her. This cave is no place for a girl her age to go alone. Sure enough, when you manage to catch up with her, you find the girl surrounded by a pack of hungry monsters. You jump into battle to try and save her, but it turns out the girl isn't quite as defenseless as she first appeared, considering she's packing a fucking cannon. Still, she did clearly need your help, and before long you're able to drive off all the monsters. The girl thanks you profusely for coming to her rescue, and introduces herself as Tita. She claims to be something of an orbment engineer, and that she needed to fix the light in the tunnel, for the lights are one of the few things that can keep monsters at bay. I mean, have you seen this tunnel? I'm not sure the lights really do all that much even when they are working. Regardless, Joshua and Estelle introduce themselves to the polite young girl, and the three of you agree to head back into town together. Fortunately, you're not too far off from where you first bumped into her, so it doesn't take much time before you get to take your first steps into the region of Zeiss. The town is mostly known for holding the largest orbment factory around. Liberal is a nation known for its rather advanced technology, at least compared to the neighboring nations, and a lot of that originates from this very city. The tunnel comes out inside that factory, weirdly enough, and it turns out Tita sort of works here, kind of. Anyways, she's apparently in the middle of a task, which she needs to go finish, but she promises to have a proper conversation with you when you all have more time on your hands. You say your goodbyes and make your way over to the local Bracer Guild. Obviously, you're still working towards completing your Bracer training, but thanks to the tip-off from Ruan's receptionist, you also might be able to find a lead on that Black Orbment, and more importantly, on Cassius. So, you meet with Zeiss's receptionist, and it turns out she's already been filled in on what we're trying to accomplish. Unfortunately, she, like everyone else, has absolutely no idea where Cassius could be, but she does have some ways of helping us. After you get your paperwork out of the way, she hands you a letter that will allow you to meet with the head chief of the factory, a man by the name of Murdoch. I mean, what better way to look into a mysterious orbment than to ask the head of an orbment factory himself? You thank the receptionist for the generous tip-off and head back to the factory you just came out of. And it doesn't take too long before you get your meeting with this Chief Murdoch. The man greets Estelle and Joshua very warmly, claiming of course he was happy to help out. After all, Cassius has done so much for this factory already. Another member added to the Cassius fan club, I Swear to God, there isn't a single person in Liberal who doesn't want to suck Cassius Bright's dick. You show Murdoch the mysterious black orbment you received, along with the letter, and ask what his thoughts are. Murdoch scans the object and agrees that it is very mysterious indeed. The material it's made out of looks very modern, but it doesn't have an identification number printed on it, so there's a good chance it wasn't made in a factory. What's more, it doesn't seem to have an opening of any kind, meaning investigating its contents will be tricky. Having no luck there, Murdoch instead turns his attention on the letter. He informs you that there's a very high likelihood that the Professor R mentioned in it is probably a Professor Russell that works at the factory. Estelle doesn't really know who that is, but Joshua claims to have heard the name. Professor Russell is apparently a very well-known name in the world of orbment study, in fact being one of the leading experts in the field. That being said, Murdoch is a little hesitant to hand the orb over to Professor Russell, claiming that, while yes, he is certainly a genius, he is also unpredictable. Still, if he truly is the Professor R from that note, then Estelle and Joshua have to meet with him if they want any hope of tracking down their father. So, Murdoch makes a call for someone to show you to the Professor's residence. Apparently, the Professor's granddaughter works at the factory and can lead the two of you to his private workshop. And well, I'll give you two guesses on who the granddaughter turns out to be. Yes, of course, Tita is the one who shows up at the door. She's just as surprised as you are when she walks into the room, but when you explain the whole situation to her, she's more than happy to lead you to her grandfather's home. You arrive in the Professor's workshop where you find the man working on some sort of machine. But when you try to introduce yourself to him, he's so absorbed in his work that he doesn't even notice Estelle or Joshua's presence, leading to a variety of wacky antics. Regardless, after you work your way through that pile of shtick, eventually you do get to sit down and have a meeting with this Professor Russell. As is tradition at this point, he is good friends with Cassius. In fact, he might be one of Cassius's oldest friends, knowing him since his army days. This was, of course, after Cassius turned water into wine and drove all the snakes out of Ireland. Sorry. Anyways, he's friends with your dad, so of course he'd be happy to help you out. So, Estelle and Joshua produce the black orbment and place it in front of the Professor. Russell is instantly intrigued by the small object in front of him, but much like the factory chief has no idea what it is or how it was made. However, he wants to investigate further. The Professor brings the orbment back to his lab where he puts it into a special machine of sorts that's meant to measure its output. Basically, it's a device that allows us to find how much magic-y power is stored inside this little thing. Russell and Tita get to work and begin taking measurements. The numbers begin to rise, rather rapidly at that, but things are going as planned. That is until a familiar glow begins to surround the orbment. It's the same light that we saw back in the Mayor's Manor in Ruan, but this seems to be a bit of a bigger reaction than that time. Almost instantly, in a wave-like fashion emanating out across the entire town of Zeiss, every single orbment within the area shuts down. Upon hearing the news, the Professor immediately shuts the experiment down, and finds that his equipment was unable to gather even a single reading from the thing. It truly is an unprecedented artifact, capable of negating any orbital power within a ridiculously large radius, and we may have only witnessed a fraction of its power here. However, before you can think on it much more, Murdoch appears, basically surmising that the town-wide blackout definitely must have come from here. He chews the Professor out for a while, but upon learning that it was all the work of that black orbment, he does agree that the thing needs to be studied closer, though hopefully without shutting down the entire town in the process. After a night's rest, the lot of you head into the larger orbital factory again, where it turns out the Professor has come up with an idea on how to study the orbment. He's been up all night trying to crack the thing open, but has been unsuccessful so far. It's far too durable a material to just cut open with saws or hammers, and when he uses more advanced tools, like a circular saw to try and cut it open, that glowy power activates once again and promptly shuts down whatever orbment was powering the tool. It is a conundrum indeed, but the Professor thinks he has a solution. The combustion engine! A primitive, inefficient power system from a bygone era that requires fuel to power a motor. It's not really used anywhere since orbital power is so much better in every way, but the factory should have a motor and some fuel lying around somewhere, and if the professor can rig up a circular saw to be powered by that, they might just be able to crack this nut open. So, after a quick fetch quest where you run around the building gathering the parts you need, you are able to put together a saw. Sure enough, despite it making a very loud racket, the saw is actually able to make a mark on the orbment's surface. Not a very big one, mind you, meaning we're going to be going through a lot of blades if we want to make it into this, but it's more progress than we've made before. We may end up getting some info on this damn thing faster than we could have guessed, however that is when a problem arises. Basically, there's a nearby village with a famous hot spring, whose water pump Russell is in charge of maintaining. And well, that water pump has broken down, so as much as he would love to work on this black orbment right away, he has prior arrangements that he needs to deal with first. But that is where Tita comes in. She's quite an accomplished orbment engineer herself, despite her age, and she volunteers to go take care of the hot spring in Russell's place. Their professor is against it though, as he doesn't want her traveling through that dangerous monster-filled territory. I mean, I don't know where he was when we first ran into her, but regardless, that won't be a problem either, obviously, because Estelle and Joshua volunteer to escort Tita to the village as her guards. After all, our top priority right now is that black orbment, and we can't really do anything about it until the professor cracks it open, so why not help him out if it means it'll get done faster? So, Professor Russell relents, and the three of you prepare to head out to the nearby village of Elmo. This, of course, turns into another character building section, as Estelle and Joshua get to be more familiar with their little traveling companion Tita, as well as learn a bit more about themselves. So, let's summarize. In the case of Tita, we learn that her parents left some time ago, and she has no idea where they currently are. This leaves the poor girl with a slight feeling of abandonment, obviously, but she is happy that she still has her grandfather with her. Estelle, in particular, grows quite close with Tita after learning this information, and starts lightly doting on her as if she were her own younger sister. As for Estelle's development, she's feeling torn. On the one hand, she's still worried about her father. She's made it all the way to Zeiss already, and she has not seen a single trace of him yet. But on the other hand, she's still trying to wrap her head around all the confusing emotions she has surrounding Joshua. This is mostly brought to a head when Tita asks if the two of them are a couple, and Estelle wavers back and forth for a while on how she feels about that. You also run into Dorothy the photographer, who absentmindedly wandered into a group of monsters and your group are forced to save. You hang out with her for a little bit and promise to head back to Zeiss with her when Tita's done fixing the water pump. Finally, as dictated by anime law for some reason, there is a hot spring, so you must do the one joke that accompanies every hot spring episode. And that's about it. Tita fixes up the water pump fairly quickly, you spend the night at the inn, and the next day your party is fit and ready to head back to Zeiss. Hopefully by now, the professor will have broken into the black orbment and we can finally start getting some answers. The three of you, along with Dorothy, start making your way back towards Zeiss, but as you do, you bump into a figure you've never met before. It's an incredibly tall man, apparently hailing from a nation to the east of Liberal known as the Republic of Calvard. It's a short meeting, but the guy certainly leaves an impression. Anyways, the man simply asks you for directions to the hot spring before leaving. Your party return to Zeiss and get ready to say your goodbyes to Dorothy, but that's when Estelle and Joshua notice something odd. There seems to be smoke emanating from the orbital factory. Your party rush up the down escalator to see what's going on and find that the factory has been evacuated. You meet with Chief Murdoch, who explains that it looks like a gas leak or something happened. He's not really sure, but he's happy everyone managed to escape. Where's the professor? Well, shoot. Tita, obviously worried, begs to go look for her grandpa, and Estelle and Joshua agree to escort her. The three of you enter the building, but find that the smoke isn't really as bad as you expected, actually, which in and of itself is actually kind of worrying. Joshua speculates that this smoke is not caused by a fire or a gas or anything, but more likely it's something of a smokescreen. And sure enough, you check around the area and find a smoking canister, not unlike the ones used by the Capuas to escape from you on several occasions. Which means someone deliberately used the smoke to set up a diversion, but what for? Uneasy, the three of you make your way to the professor's lab, but when you arrive, you find the saw still running, but the professor nowhere to be seen. As you try to gauge what exactly happened here, a familiar voice addresses you, and you turn to find AItSF. Again, cannot seem to stop running into him in situations like this. Regardless, AItSF informs you that his investigations into the Men in Black had brought him into Zeiss, and he just so happened to see the whole commotion surrounding the factory, so he rushed over. You fill him in that you're looking for the professor, and he agrees to help you look for him. You scour the various floors of the factory, finding several more of those smoking canisters along the way, but it's not until you reach the very top floor that you finally find the professor and the Men in Black. It looks like they were the ones who set up those canisters to create that smokescreen, and even worse yet, it seems like their target is Russell himself, as he's lying unconscious next to them. Your party charge at the men, but the minute they recognize AItSF, they turn tail and manage to clamber into the elevator before you can reach them. With no other option, your party head back for the stairs and rush down to the bottom floor, but of course, the elevator reached there much faster than you could. You rush outside to see if you can't catch up with them, but all you find is Chief Murdoch, Dorothy, and the rest of the factory employees looking at you confused. You ask if they saw any Men in Black leaving the building, and Murdoch replies with a no. However, a group of soldiers did just leave the building a little bit before us. Specifically, it was a group of royal guards, that elite unit of soldiers that guard the Queen. Russell had just assumed that they were there to investigate the commotion, so he had let them pass without question. However, Dorothy claims that she did take a picture of them. Well, shoot, the Men in Black must have disguised themselves in the elevator. Although, how did they manage to get their hands on royal guard uniforms? Well, no time for that now. You push past Murdoch and rush into the city to see if you can catch up with the kidnappers. But no dice. By the time you're able to survey the city, the Men in Black are long gone, and Professor Russell with them. We cut to the next day, where that lady, Amalthea, Colonel Richard's right hand, shows up to investigate our report. She claims that she's not exactly sure what happened, but the fact that people disguise themselves as the royal guards is very worrying news for the army, so they'll be looking into it very deeply. She requests Dorothy hand over the photograph she took of the perpetrators so she can look more closely into their identities, which Dorothy does, albeit reluctantly, before Amalthea returns to the military. Well, it's good to know that the army is looking into this too, but that doesn't mean that we're about to give up our own investigation. AItSF seems to have more or less accepted our talents at this point, and agrees to jump on board in our rescue of the professor. After all, it does involve the Men in Black, so a lot of you return to the Bracer Guild to begin planning what your next move will be, but that is when you run into yet another surprising figure. It's a professor, but not Russell. It's Alba. He claims that he was studying an ancient tower just outside of Zeiss, one quite similar to the one that we first met him on. Anyways, while he was busy studying, he happened to notice a bunch of soldiers in royal guard uniforms making their way inside. At first, he didn't really think much of it, but after a while, he began to feel that they were acting rather suspiciously for soldiers, very covert and on guard. So he decided to report that news to the local Bracer Guild, just in case. Well, sure enough, that seems to be the targets we're looking for. What a stroke of luck to have someone just kind of spot them like that. AItSF quickly starts to draw up a plan of attack, but when Tita asks to come along to rescue her grandfather, he flatly refuses. At first, Estelle tries to stick up for Tita and argues that she should come along, but eventually realizes that going after a group of what are essentially terrorists with a 12-year-old girl might not be the greatest of ideas. Which, unfortunately, results in Tita running away in tears. It's sad, but probably for the best. We'll make it up for her by rescuing her grandpa. So, off to the tower you go, and after a fair trek through the fields and a bunch of random monster fights throughout the tower, you arrive at the top in time to see those Men in Black trying to escape on an airship. You promptly kick their asses once more, and just like last time, they start resorting to dirty tactics, this time threatening to kill the professor if we stop them from escaping. You back off a bit to protect the professor, but you're not about to just let them walk off this time. AItSF quietly signals to the pair of you to get ready. The moment they turn to try and board that airship, we strike as fast as we can. You wait, tense, with bated breath for the right moment to arrive. But just before it does...
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
Yes, it looks like Tita followed you all the way here, and in a desperate act attempts to save her grandpa from the black-masked assailants. One of the soldiers fires a retaliatory shot back at her, which forces Agate to jump in, taking the bullet in her place. Though, fortunately, it only grazes him. The guys in black are confused for a moment, and even a little disgusted at one of their own for firing at a kid, but eventually realize that they have their opportunity. They quickly load the professor onto the ship and fly off into the distance, well out of our reach. Damn. Tita, as you might expect, breaks into tears at the loss of her closest family. As Estelle and Joshua struggle to find the right words to say, Agate steps forward and, oh dear. Well, it's outwardly very harsh, but it might be what Tita needs to hear at this point. At the end of the day, Tita jumping in guns blazing ruined our one chance at rescuing the professor. To make matters worse, she put herself in harm's way, meaning Agate was forced to prioritize saving her over his own job. But behind his criticisms, there is a hint of caring in Agate's words. He tells Tita that she needs to focus on improving herself, get to the point where she can fully protect herself, and only then should she worry about helping others. Tita seems to recognize the kindness behind his harsh words, dries her tears, and gives Agate a heartfelt thanks for saving her life. Satisfied, the four of you decide to exit the tower and plan exactly how you want to continue your quest to rescue the professor. As you make it to the bottom and begin your moderate trek back to Zeiss, you encounter a familiar face once again. It's that giant guy you met earlier. As he talks to your group though, the man asks if Agate is feeling alright. He doesn't look so good. Your party turns around, and sure enough, Agate looks absolutely awful, like he's on death's door. Practically on cue, Agate slumps to the floor, and Joshua is quickly able to work out that the bullet that hit him probably was poisoned in some way. Your party, now panicked, rush to the hospital, that giant guy very kindly offering to carry Agate for us. After a bit of questioning from a couple different sources, eventually we find out that he's been poisoned with a neurotoxin, and the only potential cure is a special moss that can be found in a nearby cavern. You return to the Bracer Guild to gather some info on the moss before you head out, and you find the giant man there, who you now know is named Zin. Turns out the guy is actually a bracer as well, though obviously hailing from a different nation. Anyways, once you fill the guild and him in on the entire situation, he is more than happy to accompany you while you try and hunt down this moss. Tita too volunteers to help, though this time wanting to make it clear that she won't get in the way if the going gets too tough for her. Your party are pretty happy to have her along. I mean, gameplay-wise, it's not like she's that much weaker than everyone else. And so you head into the cavern, which turns out to be filled with weird, flappy penguins of all monsters. Anyways, after killing enough penguins to satisfy every orca surrounding Antarctica and their king, you find the moss and return to the city, where night has now fully fallen. You hope against hope that you were quick enough in getting the antidote that Agate will have enough time to recover. But for now, the only thing you can do is wait, and at the very least, Agate appears to be in stable condition. With that, your party decide to turn in for the night, though Tita volunteers to stay by Agate's side, seemingly still feeling a bit guilty about everything that happened. The next day, Estelle and Joshua head to the docks to see Zin off. He's still in the middle of his journey, and is apparently headed for the capital city of Grancell. He apologizes for not being able to stick around and help with the whole situation you found yourselves in, but you lot just thank him for all the help he did provide. Maybe we'll meet him again once we make our way to Grancell, Until then, though, you've got your own problems to worry about. Namely, how do we go about searching for Professor Russell now? You head back to the Bracer Guild to regroup and think on what your course of attack will be. You talk with the receptionist and see if she has any new leads on where that airship may have gone, but sadly she reveals that they have nothing. Although that in and of itself might actually be telling, because for whatever reason, the army has not mentioned a thing about finding that airship either. In fact, the army has been strangely silent for a while now. Apparently the receptionist hasn't even been able to get in contact with the intelligence division, despite the fact that they were supposed to be keeping in touch with the Bracers about the missing professor. That's what Amalthea said when she talked with us. So what the heck is going on at the army? As if in response to that question, Dorothy, the photographer, appears behind you. If you recall, she had taken a picture of the escaping man in black, and the army had taken her camera's orbment in order to investigate the people photographed. Well, they still haven't returned the camera back to her, even though she specifically went to the nearby army headquarters to request her property returned. The only thing she did manage to get while there was a photo of the army's fortress, which she took while leaving empty-handed and dejected. Estelle and Joshua casually glance at the photo before doing a double take, because wouldn't you know it, the photo somehow, clearly, shows the airship the men in black escaped in. It's an amazing fucking coincidence, but it's also kinda worrying. There might be shadier things than we expected going on behind closed doors in the military. For now, this is far from enough evidence to really do more than speculate. You need to do some investigating, and Joshua decides that the best action might be to go for the direct approach. That is to say, directly ask the army about this photo and gauge their reaction. The receptionist agrees, and so Estelle and Joshua take a copy of the photo and head for this nearby army fortress. Once there, after a bit of debate with some rather uneasy looking guards, you manage to get a bit of an impromptu meeting with the head of the fortress, a man by the name of Major Sid. He seems like a nice enough fellow, but definitely seems to be acting a little suspiciously. Not wasting any time, the two of you, posing as two simple contra braces, just bringing up any info we find about the missing professor, show him the photo. The Major is certainly surprised by the photo and definitely very off-put by its reveal. However, he doesn't really give you much more than that. After you show him the photo, Sid simply says he'll give it to the Intelligence Division when they return. When you ask him where the Intelligence Division is, if they can't look at it right now, he simply states that that's classified information before returning to the fortress. But as he does return, the large mechanical gate that blocks the fortress's entrance suddenly malfunctions and is unable to fully close. Interesting. Estelle and Joshua decide to cut their losses here and start their return journey to Zeiss. But as they do, they begin to talk about how strange that whole encounter was, especially about that malfunction at the gate. It was very sudden and odd for what is supposed to be one of the most secure facilities in all of Liberal, although it might be a little less odd if, say, there was an object nearby that had the capability of shutting down anything operated by orbital power, perhaps? Yes, based off the photo, that gate malfunction, and just how off-putting the army is acting, there is a very high probability that the professor is within that fortress, which means that those men in black may very well be military personnel, although that has some worrying implications behind it. For now, though, this is still all technically speculation, though, so the two of you head back to the Bracer Guild to fill them in on everything that went down. Once more, you fill in the receptionist, as well as Murdoch, the chief engineer, about everything you found. The two of them agree that it's almost certain at this point the army is holding Professor Russell, but what exactly that means is another story. The army itself isn't one continuous entity after all. There's the Intelligence Division who has their fingers all over this case, but there's also the Royal Guardsmen whose uniforms the men in black were wearing when they kidnapped the professor, and several other divisions. So chances are that this is being carried out by one of those groups, but what exactly are they hoping to accomplish? Regardless, for now you don't have quite enough info to really speculate that much on it, so your main priority still needs to be rescuing the professor from his unfortunate imprisonment. As if in response to that thought, once again you hear a familiar voice behind you, and this time it's Tita and Agate. It looks like the medication finally paid off, and Agate is back fully on his feet. Still a little under the weather, but well enough to be moving on his own. It also looks like Tita and Agate have grown a bit closer thanks to her watching over him. Neat. Anyways, with a lot of you here, the Bracers, along with the engineers from the Orbital Factory, come up with a plan to infiltrate this highly secure fortress. Essentially, the plan goes as such. One of the Orbital Factory ships makes regular visits to the fortress for basic maintenance and repairs. Your party will stow away in one of the supply crates, wait until the cover of night, and then break the professor out from the inside. It won't be easy though, as the army has a special series of sensors that can check the cargo for any living organism. But that's where Tita comes in. Apparently, just recently, Professor Russell invented a device that could jam various orbital technology from a distance and allow someone to enter the facility undetected. However, she's the only one who knows how to use it, so she has to come along. Agate is definitely annoyed at this, but he has seemed to have grown a bit softer on the girl, and so eventually relents. Thus, Thus, the plan is set in motion. Your party crowd into a very cramped storage container, meaning Estelle and Joshua have to get in close proximity with one another. Oh, how embarrassing. Anyways, after a few bumps and a long cramped afternoon in the army supply room, your group finally exit their improvised transportation vessel and get ready to set the plan in motion. Thankfully, the Bracer Guild had an old map of the fortress handy, meaning you aren't traveling blind for once. Figuring the professor is most likely being held in the laboratory, your party carefully sneak past the few guards out on patrol and into the very heart of the fortress. Before long, you arrive at the lab's location, and sure enough, your suspicions are proven true. Outside the lab, standing watch are a pair of men wearing the very same armor you've seen several times now. Not wanting to alert them immediately, you do a little perimeter check of the building and manage to find a window with which to gaze within. And, wouldn't you know it, inside you find the Professor, Major Sid, and Colonel Richard and Captain Amalthea. It looks like the Intelligence Division really are the ones behind all this. The Colonel and Captain, seemingly far more toxic than the first few times you met them, look to be blackmailing the Professor into working for them, basically threatening to deal with Tita if he doesn't comply. And it looks like their main interest is in that black orbment. I guess when we accidentally caused that citywide blackout the other day, that was when the army was tipped off to its presence and made its move. Strangely, the Colonel refers to the black orbment as something called a gospel for whatever reason. Perhaps he has a deeper understanding of what it actually is. Still, whatever it is they plan to do with it, it can't be good. Some serious waves are beginning to stir in the nation of Liberal. For now, you can't worry about that though. You continue to monitor what's going on. Before long, that man in the red mask shows up and mentions to the Colonel that the plan they've been working on is proceeding in the capital. Richard seems pleased by the news and makes to leave, taking the black orbment with him. Your party watch their airship take off into the distance before turning back to the matter at hand, namely rescuing the Professor. With Richard and his detachment now gone, security around the lab is limited to just 2 guys, and well, we've already fought a few of these guys before already, so I think you can figure out how this is going to turn out. After kicking their asses, you enter the room where, at last, Tita and her grandfather get to have their heartfelt reunion. Aw. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't last for long, as it turns out one of the guards you defeated wasn't fully unconscious, and he manages to sound the alarm. Which means the grounds are now swarming with a platoon of guards looking for you. Wanting to cause as little fuss as possible, you sneak around the perimeter of the fortress as quietly as you can until you're forced to duck into one of the lesser guarded areas, the fortress's headquarters. This is a long way from the exit you were planning on using, but there's also so many guards, it's basically your only option. You scour the place to see if there's anything of use, but sadly it's just a series of empty corridors and mostly locked doors. You do find a set of stairs that lead down to a lower level, but all that's down there is the prison, where you, Hey, wait a minute. Huh, so this is where the Capuas are being held, huh? You have a bit of a fun conversation with them, but before long decide you need to get back to your search, leaving the poor Capuas frustratedly yelling at you to let them out. Still, this isn't good. We have nowhere left to turn, and before long, the army is going to search in here as well. Fortunately, though, that is when you hear a voice beckoning you from farther down the hallway. Confused, but seeing no other option, your party follow it and find that one of the doors that was previously locked is now open. You head inside and find Major Sid. It looks like he's had enough of the Intelligence Division's scheming, and he lays out for you everything that's happened. Apparently, the Intelligence Division are staging something close to a coup. Basically, they've managed to already take control of most of the military at this point. Colonel Richard is a very trusted name, and there's not really a lot of power to oppose him. To make matters worse, the only people in the military who could rival Richard, the Royal Guardsmen, are currently being arrested en masse on suspicion of terrorism. It looks like this is the reason why those men in black wore Royal Guardsmen uniforms, so that they would get implicated in the attack on the Orbital Factory, and the Intelligence Division would have a reason to arrest them. The Intelligence Division is even using Dorothy's photo as proof of this. The only other person who could possibly stand up to them, General Morgan, that guy who hated Bracer officers from back in Bose, has apparently also been taken into custody, although it's not really clear at this point why he let himself get taken in so easily. To make matters even worse, apparently the Queen herself has remained oddly silent on the whole matter, keeping to herself and rarely, if ever, making public appearances. Whew. However, Major Sid is done with it all, and he wants to help you in any way he can. He leads you to a secret passageway hidden within his office, offering your party an easy route to escape the fortress. After all, you are the children of the legendary, wonderful, world-changing Cassius. Bro, come the fuck on! How the hell did a man who apparently has more clout than Jesus, Buddha, and Vishnu combined not mention a single goddamn thing to his daughter? So, Sid fills you in on some facts about your father that somehow never made their way to you. We knew from General Morgan that Cassius was a pretty big name in the military, but apparently Cassius was actually the former head of the military, and went by Colonel Cassius. Directly beneath him were his two most loyal soldiers, General Morgan and at the time, Captain Richard. And the three of them are often credited as being the reason why Liberal was able to prevail over Erebonia in the previous war. Jesus Christ, Cassius, what didn't you do? In any event, you don't really have the time to get any more details out of Sid. You make your way into the secret tunnel, clamber onto a boat that was moored down there, and get yourselves a safe distance away from the fortress. Once you land, your small group are finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. But you're not completely out of the woods yet. Once Richard hears that Russell managed to escape, he is not just going to let that slide. There will undoubtedly be people hunting the professor. This is when AItSF decides to make a declaration. He tells Estelle and Joshua to head back to Zeiss and return to your usual bracer duties. Estelle resists at first, but AItSF explains his thought process. Basically, Estelle and Joshua are unknown entities in this whole thing. The intelligence division is obviously going to be chasing down Russell from now on, and Tita unfortunately has been dragged into it all thanks to her connection to him. As for AItSF, he has a long history of sparring with the Men in Black, so they're going to be hunting for him regardless. But Estelle and Joshua? They've had a few run-ins with the Men in Black, sure, but they were all under the guise of regular bracer work. As long as Major Sid doesn't blab, the intelligence division really shouldn't have any idea how deeply involved we are in this whole case, and shouldn't really be actively searching for us. So AItSF states that we should return to Zeiss and act in our usual public manner. Estelle understands the points that AItSF is making, but still is against abandoning her friends. So Professor Russell decides to come up with a solution. He claims that since we are free to move around in the open, he wants to make a request of us. One of the more confusing aspects surrounding this whole situation with the military and intelligence division is the Queen's complete lack of a response. Russell apparently knows the Queen personally, and finds it hard to believe that she would just sit back silently if she knew what exactly was going on. So, Russell makes a formal request of you. Head to the capital city of Grancell, meet with the Queen, and inform her about Richard and this black orbment he seems so intent on studying. Russell still isn't 100% certain on what this thing is, but he knows that whatever Richard plans to do with it, it can't be good. So, it looks like we've got a new mission to follow through. It will be tough having to part with our friends like this, but this is the role that we have to play. You give Tita a long hug goodbye, thank AItSF for all his help, and watch as the three of them scurry off into the night. Oof, we've been going at this for a while, haven't we? Well, it's all been leading to this, so let's get to it. Like most chapters, the final chapter opens with a quick look at someone other than Estelle and Joshua. Although in this case, it's perhaps somewhat surprising because we get to see two former teammates that we haven't seen for a while. Chloe and Olivier. Olivier is apparently chilling out in the capital, inside the Erebonian embassy as it happens. There, he meets with a guy named Vander, and once again we get some more hints about who exactly Olivier is. We also find out that the Erebonians have apparently been trying to track down Cassius, but it seems like their search in Liberal has been for naught because it turns out he's been in Erebonia this whole time. Not really sure what he was doing there, but I guess that's why we've seen neither hide nor hair of him up till now. As for Chloe, she's going through a much more dramatic scene. It looks like she, along with the few remaining Royal Guardsmen, are currently being hunted by the Intelligence Division. First Lieutenant Schwartz fights to buy Chloe some time to escape, but it ends up being in vain. A ship we're very familiar with, carrying Colonel Richard, whose shadow can apparently astrally project, stops just in front of the fleeing Chloe, and she is left with no option but to be taken prisoner. With that out of the way, we return back to our leading duo. After a quick wrap-up where Estelle and Joshua say their goodbyes to the people they got to know in Zeiss, as well as of course receiving our recommendation from the guild, the two of you begin your journey towards the capital city of Grancell. Initially, you were going to fly there via airship, but those plans get cancelled when it turns out that the army has severely slowed down air traffic. It looks like they've basically gone public with their announcement that the Royal Guardsmen are terrorists, and they're using that as a pretense to basically search every airship in the hunt for terrorism. Just another ruse by the intelligence division to further exert control over the populace and prevent anyone from being able to stop them. So that means flying is a no-go. While we're not exactly on the Intelligence Division's most wanted list, we also don't really want to draw any attention if we can avoid it. So it's back to walking for us, although considering Zeiss is actually pretty damn close to Grancell, it's not really that long of a walk. Along the way, as per usual, you pass through one of the many army checkpoints that dot the land. However, while this usually goes rather smoothly, this time you get stopped. Security has been jacked up in the wake of the guardsmen's terrorist plot, and bracers are getting examined more closely. When the guards question you on why you're going to Grancell, you realize you can't just tell them that you're going to talk with the Queen about the Intelligence Division's coup. So the best excuse you can come up with is that you're working on a confidential job there. This, of course, raises the guard's suspicion further, but before they can press you anymore, you actually get some aid from a surprising place. It's Professor Alba. Again, he certainly seems to get around a lot. Anyways, he jumps in claiming that he hired the pair of you to escort him to the capital. Joshua, being quick on the uptake, and Estelle, being astoundingly slow on the uptake, eventually see what he's doing and play along. Thanks to his help, you're able to avoid suspicion and are free to continue on your journey. This, of course, leads to you escorting the professor to the capital, as he is traveling to Grancell, and he did help you, so why not travel together? He's going to be working at the local museum in Grancell, at least until the Queen's birthday, so maybe we'll bump into him from time to time. It doesn't take too long from the checkpoint to reach the capital itself, the royal city of Grancell. Perhaps unsurprisingly, there does appear to be a fair amount of security surrounding the place. Still, that doesn't mean that it's not exciting to see the capital itself. Apparently, the city has just begun hosting a rather famous martial arts tournament. Sadly, you're kind of in the middle of a job right now, so you're not really going to be able to take part in said tournament, but hey, maybe you'll be able to stop in and see a few fights at some point. You say your goodbyes to the professor, who graciously thanks you and heads off to the museum before making your way to the local Bracer Guild. There, you find a surprisingly large group of bracers, and what do you know, some of them are familiar faces. There's Karna, the girl who got her ass handed to her back in Ruan, and Grant, a guy that you met way back at the beginning of the game who's friends with Shara. There's also two new faces that you've never met before, a girl named Annalise and a guy named Kurt. You get a brief introduction with each of them, but it looks like they're about to head off for a job, so it's not long. Apparently their job involves taking part in that martial arts tournament, which does make Estelle a bit jealous. In any event, Estelle and Joshua take this opportunity to get all their paperwork finished so that they can begin their work in earnest in Grancell. Which of course now means, how the heck are we supposed to talk with the Queen? After you explain the whole situation to the receptionist, he tells you that it's not going to be easy. Apparently Colonel Richard is a rather beloved man by the people, so it'll be difficult to throw any suspicion on him. And well, thanks to this whole terrorist fear-mongering that's being spread by the Intelligence Division, the army can basically ratchet up their security as much as they want without really raising any suspicion from the public. So we'll have to be clever in what we do if we want to have any chance at meeting with the Queen. For now, Estelle and Joshua opt to visit the castle itself and just see what kind of information we can gather. They decide to pose as regular tourists. Tours of the castle are a pretty regular thing. It's obviously a great draw for people visiting Grancell, but of course, with the whole city on high security, the tours are currently shut down. Still, the guards are surprisingly amiable, as they seem to take you at your word and seem genuinely sorry that you weren't able to go on your sightseeing tour. As a result, you are actually able to gather a bit of information from them rather easily. Basically, the guards tell you that the Queen has taken ill as of late. She never shows herself in public, always confined to her room. In her place, the successor to the throne is handling the affairs of Grancell. Now, under normal circumstances, that would be the Queen's granddaughter, the Princess, but considering her young age, it's actually been handed to the Queen's nephew. Well, would you look at that? It's the spoiled brat who stole our room back in Ruan. Anyways, after he passes you by, thankfully not remembering your faces, the guards tell you don't worry about it though. He may be incompetent, everyone agrees on that, but don't worry, Grancell is still in strong, capable hands, as his right hand is the incredibly wonderful Colonel Richard. Great, so we've got a puppet king and the colonel acting as his shady vizier. Still, at least we managed to glean some useful information, and heck, the guards didn't even find out who we were for once. For the time being, Estelle and Joshua decide that they need to keep an eye on this Duke Dunnan, as he's probably the closest thing we have to finding a way inside the castle. And well, when he left, it seemed like he was heading towards the Colosseum to watch that tournament play out, so hey, guess we get to go check that out too. The two of you head in the Colosseum's direction, and after obtaining some tickets, make your way into the stands. The tournament is already about halfway done for the day, but there still seems to be a few fights left to witness. The first one we get to watch is one between our Bracer friends and a bunch of nameless NPCs, and unsurprisingly, the Bracers kick the NPCs' asses. The second is a fight between, wait, is that Zin? Huh. He appears to be fighting alone, which is a bit of a surprise, but he is a mountain of a man, and the nameless NPCs he's against are no match for his mighty fists. And with that, the fighting for the day is done. To close the ceremonies off, Dunnan himself addresses the audience directly with a long-winded and half-baked speech, mostly congratulating himself for being such a great guy. However, he does say one thing interesting. He proclaims that the winner of the tournament shall win the privilege of a feast inside the castle walls. Well, now that is interesting. An actual inn to the castle. Although it seems you're a little late for the party. The tournament is already underway after all, but still, you do have Bracer friends who are already part of it, so Estelle and Joshua make the somewhat regrettable decision to ask them to fulfill the request in your place. However, as you meet with them and congratulate them on their win, the Bracers themselves actually give you a solution you weren't expecting. You see, the reason Zin is fighting alone is because the tournament was originally supposed to be a one-on-one affair, but got changed to a team structure last minute. However, he had come here from the Calvard Republic to Liberal specifically to be in that tournament, so left with no option, he had to sign up as a single participant. But the Bracers in attendance all agree that it's unfair for him to have to be subjected to such a handicap. So they suggest, why don't we just join Zin's team, or at least offer to? It would help him out and also give us the opportunity to potentially visit the castle. This is great news for us because not only does it mean we can still fulfill the professor's request ourselves, but even if we screw up and don't win the tournament, we still can fall back on handing the request over to Kurt, Annalise, Karna, and Grant. So it's basically a win-win. You rush off to see if you can find Zin and request to join his team. But that actually turns out to be not the easiest thing to do. You check around the Colosseum and the Bracers Guild, but find that he has already left both places, apparently headed towards a local bar that he normally visits. So you head for the bar, but you don't find Zin anywhere. Instead, you find... Sadly, we don't get to keep Olivier's company for very long, as he offhandedly suggests that Estelle maybe has more of a crush on Joshua than when they last traveled together. So he's out of commission for a while, so we have to continue our hunt for Zin alone. According to the bartender, he apparently enjoys strolls through a nearby garden that used to be monster-free, but with this whole terrorist debacle, there haven't been any soldiers to keep the area secure, and some monsters have moved in. You head in that direction, and after a bit of searching through the park, you suddenly hear a scream. You rush to its source and find a nun under assault by a group of insect-like creatures. Estelle and Joshua are promptly able to squash them, but that only alerts more of the damn things. This time, there's enough of them that it may be hard to defeat all of them while simultaneously protecting the nun. But that's when the man we've been looking for finally decides to make his goddamn appearance. Zin pops up behind the creatures, and with his help, your party are very easily able to both protect the civilian and wipe out the monster menace. With the threat now safely dealt with, you catch up a bit with Zin, filling him in on all the stuff he missed when he left Zeiss. You also get to find out that Zin is apparently a shameless womanizer, as he rather blatantly starts hitting on the nun you just saved. However, all this gets interrupted by a patrol of soldiers, only these ones are wearing a familiar set of black armor. It looks like they're guarding a local villa that used to belong to the royal family, but is now being used as a part of the anti-terrorist effort, so you know nothing good can be going on there. Still, you don't want to cause a fuss right now, so you play the role of just two simple bracers out and about to save this poor nun. And fortunately, it seems like the soldiers buy your tale. That being said, they do rather pointedly warn you that that if you go anywhere near the villa, you'll be arrested on the spot. The soldiers leave, escorting the nun back to Grancell, who thanks you once again for saving her from the monsters. With the soldiers gone, you finally get the opportunity to talk with Zen about what you've wanted to say this entire time. You head back to Grancell and fill him in on how you would like to join him in the tournament, act as his backup if you will. You don't quite fill him in on everything though, leaving out why exactly you want to enter the castle, feeling that the fewer people who know your true intentions, the better. Still, Zin is happy to have you on board. He's already apparently sufficiently impressed enough with our skills from when we fought with him last time, so that's nice. However, he suggests that it would be great if we could also get a fourth. Even fighting 3v4, while much better than fighting solo, is still a handicap after all. But where could we possibly find a late stage and possibly fabulous entrant at this hour? Yes, obviously the final team member will be Olivier. Estelle and Joshua are of course reluctant to allow him back on the team, but Zin sizes him up and admits that he looks like a decent fighter. So, a partnership is once again formed and your tournament team is finalized. For now though, it's late and time to turn in. Our leading pairs say goodbye to their new teammates and head off to the local inn where they're staying for the night. As has become par for the course at this point with Estelle, as she steps into the room and realizes she's spending a night alone with Joshua, she starts to become very self-conscious of her feelings. However, Joshua is of course able to notice that Estelle is acting a bit stranger than she usually does, and the two share an actually rather heartfelt moment. Basically, Estelle tells Joshua that she realizes she's been acting strange lately, but it's nothing worth worrying about. She's just working through some things in her head, and when she's ready to talk about them, Joshua will be the first to know. Joshua, in turn, is happy to hear that nothing too serious was going on, and claims he'll always be ready to lend an ear when she's ready to talk, the same way Estelle has done about his past. Thus, our leading duo's trust in one another once again affirmed, the two turn in for the night. The next morning, you meet up with Zin and Olivier, and after making sure that your gear is ready and your team is combat ready, the four of you head for the Coliseum. And as you get there, you find out that your opponents are going to be the Ravens of all people, that ragtag group of hoodlums that you fought back in Ruan. Anyways, they show up to try and intimidate your team with a bit of heckling, but instead it kind of results in Estelle just complimenting them for making it through the preliminary rounds. And her comments are just so genuine that the Ravens can't help but feel kind of encouraged by her support, and they end up leaving in shame. Okay, that's actually kind of adorable. Anyways, you head into the waiting room, where you can have another lighthearted conversation with the other Bracer team before the matches begin in earnest. First up, it's your Bracer pals versus a group of soldiers, and it's not a particularly close match. Next is us, who are of course fighting the Ravens. And while it does seem that they've improved since you last met, you've still pretty easily got their number and they go down without too much fight. Plus, Olivier and Zin are no slouches in the combat department. Zin in particular is built like a fucking brick wall. Anyway, with that victory under your belts, you go back to your room to watch the final two matches. Third up, we have yet another group of soldiers facing off against the Capuas? Yeah, they appear to still be under arrest by the army, but for whatever reason, it looks like Duke Dunnan opted to allow them to enter the tournament. Huh. Well, anyways, their fight against a bunch of nameless NPCs goes as you might expect. The nameless NPCs win! No, obviously the Capuas win. Which means it's on to our final match of the day, which is between, once again, a nameless group of NPCs and a squad fielded by the Army's Intelligence Division. So yes, it's a group in that all too familiar at this point black armor. And would you look at that, they're even being led by that mystery guy in the red mask, Lieutenant Lawrence being his name, and well, let's just say this ends up being the most one-sided match of the day. Joshua in particular seems rather shaken up by witnessing Lawrence's fighting style, but in true Joshua fashion, the moment anyone presses him further on the matter, he clams up and returns to his normal self. Anyways, the first day of fighting is done, which means it's time to part once again. Olivier and Zin head off to go get shit-faced at the local tavern, leaving Estelle and Joshua with no other option than just heading back to the inn. However, as they arrive, who should they bump into but Mr. Reporter himself, Neil. He's apparently doing a cover of the tournament for his newspaper, and seeing as he knows us, he figured we'd be a good pair to interview. Not really having much better to do, and Neil bribing you with a free meal, you take up his offer and follow him to a local coffee shop where you plan to have a little chat. After a rather large meal, all on Neil's dime, thank you very much, the true reason for his questioning finally comes out. You see, Neil has begun to realize that there's more going on underneath the surface than the intelligence division likes to let on. And he figures that the two of us are probably somehow connected to that. Estelle and Joshua are surprised to see just how much Neil has figured out, but also see an opportunity. Neil has access to a lot of information that would be difficult to come by for a bracer, so perhaps if we let slip a little about what we know, Neil might be a valuable ally in our fight against the intelligence division. So you tell him most everything you know regarding the intelligence division and Colonel Richard, how they were secretly behind the bandits in Bose, involved in the burning of the orphanage, and the kidnapping of Professor Russell, how just about everything you've experienced so far has been a piece of Colonel Richard's meticulously calculated plan. Neil is, understandably, blown away by the scale of it all, and has to take a few moments to get his thoughts together from everything we just dumped on him. But eventually, he gets his act together and comes to the decision that, well, he's gonna help you, obviously. As payback for dropping all this juicy information, he offers to dig up as much dirt on the intelligence division as he possibly can, and asks where we'd like him to start. Estelle suggests that Neil should look into the army's movements, you know, where they're heading or where they've been, as well as checking in on who they're keeping prisoner and where those prisoners are, namely General Morgan as well as the Royal Guard. Joshua, however, also asks that Neil run a background check on the higher-ups of the intelligence division, that being Colonel Richard, Captain Amalthea, and Lieutenant Lawrence. Neil agrees to all your demands. He can't promise anything, of course, but he has a few contacts within the army that can potentially get him some pretty reliable info. He'll see what he can do. With that, you say your goodbyes and get ready for the next day in the tournament. Glad to know that you've got someone working behind the scenes. The next day eventually comes, and after once again meeting up with Zin and Olivier, the four of you head off for your next dance with destiny. I wonder who we'll be facing today. Before that though, you have a brief run-in with Dorothy, who simply relays a message to you saying that Neil wants to meet up with you tonight after the matches are over. Cool, I guess he managed to get some of that info faster than we expected. You file into the same waiting room you stayed in yesterday, only to meet the Capuas. Now, the fact that they're in the same waiting room as you means that they won't be your next opponents, but it does mean you get to catch up with your old, frenemies? It's a bit of an interesting talk, actually. After a few jabs back and forth and some raised hackles, you finally get to question on what the heck the Capuas are thinking being in this tournament. The reason why the Duke allowed them to participate is a bit of a mystery for sure, and even they don't really know why, but they have a reason that they want to participate. And it's not even to get back at us. I mean, they don't particularly like us, obviously, but there's someone that they're even more pissed off at. Namely, the intelligence division. After all, they basically use them as pawns to increase their own influence. They were the ones secretly behind the scenes feeding them information on the army's movements so that they could be the ones to capture them. So, of course, the Capuas want to pay them back for everything they did to them. They even decided to keep mum about the fact that we happened to run into them when we broke into that fortress, which is a blessing to be sure. Perhaps these Capuas ain't so bad after all. But your conversation is interrupted as the tournament finally gets underway. The announcer reveals that the first match of the day will be held between our team and the other Bracers. It's gonna be Bracer v Bracer, and a good chance to see just how far Estelle and Joshua have come in their training. Your opponents too are rather excited for what's to come. After all, Zin is known for being an excellent fighter, one of the better Bracers out there, so they want to test their mettle too. And so the stage is set for an all-out, no-holds-barred, honest match. The opposing Bracers put up a good fight, combining a variety of different fighting styles very effectively, but Zin is a brick wall that's just a bit too high for your opponents to handle, and so before long, victory is yours. Hooray! After a quick congratulations from your opponents, all impressed at how far we've come at such a young age, you're escorted off the field and the next match is set to begin. By process of elimination, it looks like, obviously, the final match will be between the Capuas and Lieutenant Lawrence and his intelligence division goons. For better or for worse, the Capuas are at least a neutral entity in your lives right now, so you wish them luck in their fight, and Joshua even accidentally charms Josette slightly. Regardless, the Capuas take their positions and the match begins in earnest. And, well, it's certainly closer than the fight we saw yesterday. It's pretty clear the Capuas are 100% outmatched. Before long, the four of them fall, not even managing to take down a single intelligence division soldier. The Capuas leave the arena dejected, and to add insult to injury, they're ordered to immediately return to their cells. Your party does try to sympathize with them, but the Capuas aren't exactly happy to get sympathy from you. Still, they do say one thing. Josette demands that you make those intelligence punks pay for what they did in tomorrow's match. You better not lose, you hear me? To which, of course, Estelle replies, that's exactly what we're gonna do. With that, the day once again comes to an end. You part ways with Olivier and Zin once more, though this time you're the ones who are in a hurry, as you have different plans in mind. Neil called you out after all, so you make tracks for his office to see just how much info he was able to gather in a day. Jumping straight into business, Neil reveals that he's acquired background info on all the people we asked him about, so you check out what he's found. First up is the report on Colonel Richard. As Major Sid told us back in the fortress, it looks like Richard started his career serving under Cassius, before starting up the intelligence division, and things eventually evolving into what they are now. Amalthea too has a fairly expected background. She was apparently a star student at some academy, allowing her to gain a fairly decent reputation in the army from the get-go. It looks like she was personally scouted by Richard rather quickly, and before long worked her way up the ranks until she was his right hand. So it looks like they've been working together for quite a long time. Finally, there's Lieutenant Lawrence, and well, there's not really much on his file. The only thing really known about him is that he used to work for a mercenary group known as Jester, before getting recruited by Richard. It's tough to say what this means about Lawrence as a person, but it does speak to the fact that he must be an incredibly skilled fighter to get pulled into the intelligence division despite his somewhat shady background. Anyways, with those summaries out of the way, Neil also reveals that while he wasn't able to dig up too much dirt on the intelligence division's movements, he did find out one thing interesting. Namely, apparently Richard has been looking for a suitor for the princess. Why exactly he would be doing that in the middle of what is essentially a coup seems very odd, but the fact that he is means that it's probably important, so you decide to keep it in the back of your mind. But for now, that is all the info Neil has. He claims that he has another contact he needs to meet up with, and heads off, leaving you to concentrate on your task, namely winning tomorrow's match and getting your hands on that dinner invitation to the castle. But your night isn't quite over yet. As you head back to your room, Joshua suddenly notices something is off. He stops Estelle short of the door, claiming that someone has broken into the room, before bursting inside to find the room is empty. However, one of the windows is open, and sitting on the floor is a note that wasn't there before. Estelle and Joshua quickly open the letter and find a short message inside. Come and see me at the local cathedral at 10 p.m. Joshua seems rather worried, though tries his best to pretend he's not. He tells Estelle that he'll go investigate the note alone. It's fine, it's probably nothing, there's no reason for the both of them to get involved. But Estelle is of course having none of it. She might not have the quickest of uptakes, but even she realizes that he's obviously trying to hide something to keep her safe, and she is not about to let him march off on his own into whatever this might be. So the two of you agree to go together, and after a very annoying forced stealth section, the two of you arrive at the cathedral. However, as you enter the cathedral, Joshua is quickly able to realize that all his worrying was in vain, because as it turns out, the person who sent you that message was actually First Lieutenant Julia Schwarz, the leader of the Royal Guardsmen. She had disguised herself as a nun. In fact, she turns out to be that nun that you rescued from the park not too long ago. This had given her a hiding place right under the intelligence division's noses. Looks like the Royal Guardsmen have a few tricks of their own after all. Regardless, Lieutenant Schwarz quickly begins to fill you in on why exactly she reached out to you. She asks if, once you win the tournament, would it be possible for you to deliver a message to the Queen when you enter the castle? After bumping into us the other day and then seeing us enter into the tournament, she figured we were the only ones she could turn to. Well, isn't this a happy coincidence? You fill the lieutenant in that you were kinda already doing that. You have a request from Russell to meet with the Queen, so you were already gonna try and meet with her. So, of course we'd be happy to relay any message that Julia has. The lieutenant is surprised, but relieved to hear your revelation, and offers to provide any support she can in making sure you reach the castle. She provides you with a letter and suggests that you give it to a lady by the name of Hilda once you enter the castle. She is the head maid of the royal family and somebody worth trusting. Her help will be essential if we want to get an actual audience with the Queen. Unfortunately, your conversation is cut short by one of the army's late-night patrols patrols, as part of the Intelligence Division's ramped-up security. Lieutenant Schwartz quickly shows you to the back entrance and says that she'll be staying in the church if we need any more support. You thank her and make a hurried return to the inn, thankfully avoiding the stealth minigame this time. Joshua and Estelle mull over the many surprises that have come your way today, and Joshua expresses his relief that it turned out to be Lieutenant Schwartz who had sent that mysterious message and not someone else. When Estelle presses him on who he thought the letter was from, it becomes pretty clear that he assumed it was someone from his dark and mysterious past we keep getting hints at. Of course, Estelle, finally realizing this, chooses not to press the issue any further, but Joshua, seeing just how considerate Estelle always is of his feelings, finally comes to a decision. He makes a promise with Estelle that once this is all over, once they've put a stop to Richard, found Cassius, and solved all the mysteries surrounding them, then he'll be ready. Ready to finally tell her about his past. Estelle is surprised, but also elated. She feels as if a weight has been lifted off her heart. Jumping to her feet, she proclaims that if that's Joshua's plan, to spill everything once everything's done, then she will use that opportunity. Once all this nonsense is done, she too will tell Joshua everything that's been on her mind. And don't worry too much about what exactly that might be, because it's delicate, okay? Oh my god. Still, Estelle is not gonna rest anymore. Those intelligence goons better look out, because no matter what, Estelle is getting that talk. High-level government treason is no match for teenage romance, baby! So, it's the final day of the tournament, and you know exactly who your opponents will be this time. Lieutenant Lawrence and his handful of Intelligence Division goons. After one final round of training and getting all your gear sorted, you head to the Coliseum to prepare for what will most likely be your toughest fight yet. But you end up actually arriving a little bit earlier than you normally would, meaning you have some time to kill before your match starts. Estelle and Joshua decide to stroll around the Coliseum to kill some time, and end up bumping into a bunch of familiar faces who came to watch the finals, including the likes of Dorothy, the other bracers you beat yesterday, one of whom looks a little green around the gills for whatever reason, and Professor Alba. However, probably the most surprising is you meet with the mayor from Rolent, of all people. You know, from way back at the beginning of the game. Apparently, Duke Dunnan has invited more than just the winners of this tournament to the castle this evening. He's extended his invitation to all the most influential people throughout the nation of Liberal. It looks like Dunnan is planning on making some sort of announcement during this dinner, although it's not really clear what that could possibly be. Still, it's just another reason why you have to win this tournament and get into that dinner already. You head back to your prep room, and before long, the announcer makes his call, signaling that the match is finally about to be underway. You actually get to have a bit of small talk with the men in black before the match actually starts. The foot soldiers even seem a bit nervous to be fighting with us, which is actually kind of reassuring. However, Lawrence himself keeps a cool head through all of it. You both take your marks, and the fight begins. The grunts themselves are not much worse than any of the other guys in black you fought before, but Lieutenant Lawrence is clearly in a league of his own. Still, once you do manage to thin out the ranks a bit, while he does prove to be formidable, it's not like he's a match for all four of you ganging up on him. And so, inevitably, you are victorious! Although that being said, Zin can't help feel like the fight was a little anticlimactic. Perhaps Lawrence wasn't really putting his all into that match after all. Well, it doesn't matter, because you achieved your goal. You got that dinner invitation, and you are going to finally have an opportunity to meet with the Queen. The Duke personally hands you the rewards and congratulates you on a victory well earned. So your party get to bask in just a little bit of glory. Before long though, evening draws and your party prepares for the coming banquet. However, before you can begin making your way over there, a man Estelle and Joshua have never met, but we've briefly seen in one of the chapter prologues, appears. It's Vander, a friend of Olivier's? Anyways, he claims that he's come here to drag Olivier back to the embassy with him, that there's no way he'll be taking part in the castle banquet. Olivier protests, but Vander has some solid reasoning. Basically, tensions between Erebonia and Liberal are already pretty high, so if anyone did find out that this prancing buffoon was from Erebonia, it could only make relations worse. The rest of your party agree that that's actually a pretty sound reason, and so Olivier is reluctantly dragged away and out of your party. With that, you head to the castle as a group of 3. You present your IDs to the guards outside, and at last, get to do the one thing you've waited to do ever since you arrived in Grancell: enter the castle grounds. After a somewhat tense meeting with Captain Amalthea that's kind of undercut by Zin trying to hit on her, you are shown to your rooms where you'll be staying for the nights. Estelle and Joshua, wanting to get an understanding of the castle in order to find some way to meet with the Queen, tell Zin they're going to go look around the grounds for a bit before dinner. Zin shrugs and claims he wanted to kick back and relax anyway, leaving you two free to look around. Certain areas of the castle have been blocked off by Intelligence Division personnel, and you make sure to avoid those for the time being. But you do get to explore a good chunk of the place. As you found out earlier, there does appear to be a number of prominent individuals who were also invited to this dinner, and you get to meet with a bunch of old familiar faces, such as the mayor of Bose, the headmaster from Chloe's school, and the chief of the Orbital factory from Zeiss. After reconnecting with them for a bit, you continue on your exploration and eventually make it to a particularly extravagant part of the castle, high up surrounded by a beautiful garden. It looks like this place at the top of the castle is where the Queen is currently staying, as she rests through her supposed illness. Unfortunately for you, though, there are a pair of Intelligence Division guards blocking its entrance, and there appears to be no other means of ingress. You try talking with the guards a bit, posing as just 2 simple winners of the tournament, but the Intelligence Division goons are definitely a lot less friendly than the regular soldiers. However, as you do try to eke out a bit of info from the guards, a somewhat older, rather well-dressed woman steps out from behind them. The lady promptly scolds the 2 guards for harassing guests in the castle, and surprisingly, the guards seem unable to really stand up to her, acting like a pair of school kids being scolded by their teacher. It turns out this lady is Hilda, the head maid First Lieutenant Schwarz had told us about. After you get out of earshot from where the Intelligence Division guards are, you begin talking with her and show her the letter that the lieutenant gave you. Hilda quickly scans the letter and, putting 2 and 2 together, quickly beckons you to follow her back to the maid's quarters. There you fill her in on most everything, how you need to meet with the Queen as part of a request for Professor Russell. Unfortunately, though unsurprisingly, the Intelligence Division basically has the castle on lockdown, and even though Hilda has some sway, she really can't do much in the grand scheme of things. Still, she understands that it is important that we meet with the Queen, and comes up with a little plan that might allow us to have an audience with her, without the good Colonel finding out about it. However, this plan will probably take some time to set up, so she bids you to return here after the dinner has concluded, before returning to her maidly duties. The pair of you, now with a plan of attack, head back to your room and wait for dinner to begin. Before long it does, and you get to take part in a feast featuring a number of the most well-known and influential people in all of Liberal, including, of course, all the people you met before, Duke Dunnan, obviously, and the man himself, Colonel Richard. Not wanting to waste any time, Richard motions to the Duke, who sits up and declares he has an announcement to make. Pretty much everyone expected as much to happen, but all are ears on what exactly he has to announce. What was so important that it required so many people to travel such a distance for an evening of merriment? Well, Duke Dunnan passes the attention over to Colonel Richard, who in turn relays the message. The Queen has been sick for a while now, unable to even make a public appearance. That being said, it does look like she's on the road to recovery, and the plan is to have her fully return to the public's eye during her birthday celebration in a few days' time. However, due to just how severe her illness was, the Queen thinks that her time on the throne is quickly coming to a close. As such, she is making a royal proclamation. She will abdicate the throne and hand it over to her nephew, Duke Dunnan. A unison of surprised gasps encircles the table as one by one the different leaders try to get a grasp on the situation. Most of them demand that they hear this proclamation from the Queen herself. It just seems so sudden after all. Colonel Richard is ready for this, however. He tells the people assembled that he understands their worry, but the Queen will be publicly announcing this during her birthday celebration. All he's asking is if they can just shelve their doubts until then, and when that time comes, the Queen herself should be able to quiet all their worries. Simply put, he's not telling the leaders of Liberal this now out of like any sort of official proclamation. He's telling them this now so that they can prepare for how their citizens will react when the actual news does drop. It's a rational argument, actually, and while the various leaders are clearly not super thrilled with the announcement, they have no real reason not to wait for Richard's suggested amount of time. However, the headmaster does bring up the other question that's hanging in the air, namely, what about Princess Claudia? Technically speaking, she has an equal claim to the throne as Dunnan. Was she not considered at all for this whole passing of the throne? Richard simply states that the queen considered her options and decided the princess was still too young to accept the responsibility. But they are looking for a proper suitor in other nations to marry the princess and improve liberal standing in the world. With that, the evening comes to a somewhat tense close. With the info we have, it's pretty clear what Richard is trying to pull here. A puppet king with the useless Dunnan being sat around as a figurehead while Richard pulls the strings from the shadows. So, we really do need to meet with the queen herself as quickly as possible and get to the bottom of this. Once again, you're forced to lie to Zen, telling him that the pair of you are simply going out for an evening stroll before heading off back to the maid's chamber. But, before you can arrive at your scheduled rendezvous with Hilda, who should you end up bumping into but the man of the hour himself, Richard, flanked as ever by Amalthea. However, he seems oddly hospitable. He invites the two of you to come share a drink with him, as he has something he wishes to discuss with us specifically. The two of you are understandably cautious, even Amalthea seems very taken aback by the Colonel's request, but you can't exactly just turn him down without looking super suspicious, so you go along with it. Richard sends Amalthea away, which she doesn't seem very happy about, and invites the two of you to a nearby lounge, where he prepares a couple of light drinks. You sit down with the Colonel, confused on what his reasons are, but it turns out he only wants to talk about your father. I don't know why that's a surprise, literally everyone you meet seems to want to go out of their way to sing Cassius's praises, but I digress. Richard begins recanting his time working under Cassius during the war, and the many turmoils they were able to overcome thanks to his brilliant leadership. It's not exactly new news, as it's a lot of stuff that Major Sid already told us, but it is interesting to hear it from someone who was working directly under Cassius Bright. Estelle is slightly pissed at the story. After all, why does she have to keep hearing all this stuff about her own father secondhand? I agree, Estelle. But Joshua calms her down by claiming that Cassius probably just didn't want to drag his past into his new life. Richard laughs a bit at your sibling bickering and seems to come to a realization that perhaps living with his children was what Cassius needed to help him heal from losing his wife in the war. On that note, Richard thanks you for the conversation before simply walking out the door. Huh, well that didn't seem to be anything more than Richard wanting to reminisce about the past. No matter who this Richard actually is, and what he plans to gain from this whole coup, it looks like his respect and admiration for Cassius Bright is genuine. It makes you wonder, how did it all eventually lead to this? Well, for now, it's a question you can't answer. With Richard gone, you make your way, quick as you can, to the maid's quarters and apologize to Hilda for making her wait. Understanding the reason for the delay, Hilda fills you in on what plan she has to get you to meet with the Queen, and it's a pretty simple one. We're going to pretend to be maids. As long as the two of you stay close to Hilda at all times, there shouldn't be anything suspicious about a pair of new maids, and we should easily be able to slip past the Intelligence Division guards and into the Queen's little residence. This, of course, means that we once more get to witness Joshua in ladies' clothing. Oh ho ho, how hilarious. Anyways, the three of you make your way up to the Queen's chambers, and sure enough, Hilda is fairly easily able to convince the guards that you're nothing more than a pair of maids. Once inside, Estelle and Joshua return to their regular outfits and prepare to finally meet the Queen of all of Liberal. We've been working towards this for the entire chapter, but now that you're actually here, it's a little daunting. But Estelle and Joshua push those worries aside and head inside. Sure enough, there stands Queen Alicia von Oslies, by herself gazing out her window. She gives you a very courteous greeting, presumably already having been informed by Hilda about your coming. Not wanting to waste any time, you sit down with the Queen and explain how you were hired by Professor Russell to inform her about all the circumstances surrounding the Black Orbment, or Gospel. You ask her if she has any idea what the Orbment could be and why Richard would want it so badly. Well, the Queen pauses for a moment before stating that she might have a hunch, though she's unsure how Richard would know about it. She explains to you that about a decade or so ago, a massive power source was detected deep beneath Grancell. It's thought to be an ancient artifact, though considering how deep under the city it was, it would take a serious amount of time and effort to be able to reach it and confirm that fact. Anyways, based on our description of the Black Orbment, the Queen can't help but feel like it might somehow be related to that power source, though again, this is only a hunch. Still, if that power source is what Richard is after, then it can only spell trouble for the nation of Liberl. Estelle promises to the Queen that no matter what, as a bracer, she'll step up and put a stop to whatever trouble that pesky colonel is trying to brew. The Queen smiles at Estelle's words and states, "You really are Cassius's daughter." So, not only is Cassius a world-renowned bracer, one of the very best in the field, not only is he a war hero who pulled victory in the face of impossible odds against a nation magnitudes larger than him, but he was also close personal friends with the Queen's son before he died and regularly does personal requests for her. And he never thought to once mention one single iota of this to his daughter, ever. Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Glad to know that if he died in one of the countless missions he goes on, his daughter would have known less about him than a random fucking lighthouse attendant. But whatever, the game doesn't seem to think that that's incredibly irresponsible behavior, so why should I? The Queen sits down and tells the both of you a much more detailed account about your father's role in the war. How he, along with Morgan and Richard, devised a series of guerrilla tactics that allowed Liberl to cut off various Erebonian supply lines, and allowed the nation to stay relatively connected despite Erebonia's superior numbers. That being said, despite his best efforts, Cassius still did end up losing something incredibly precious to him during the war. That, of course, being Estelle's mother, his wife, Lena, which ultimately led to him leaving the military and moving to the countryside, where he, Estelle, and Joshua now live. The Queen apologizes to Estelle for her mother's death. After all, as the leader of the nation, a part of the responsibility for Lena falls on her shoulders. But Estelle claims that she doesn't need to apologize. She's proud of her father and mother, and wants to follow in their footsteps. Both of them fought hard to protect the land that she grew up in, and, well, Estelle wants to do the same. That's why she became a bracer, after all. The Queen is moved by Estelle's words, and so decides to make an official request of the two of you. You see, the reason why she's been so quiet, despite everything the Intelligence Division has been doing, is because they have leverage on her. They have taken the Queen's granddaughter, Princess Claudia, hostage, along with several other key figures, and are using it to force the Queen into capitulation. Basically, Richard is using the opportunity to force the Queen into handing the crown over to Duke Dunnan, even though the Queen thinks Claudia would be a far more suitable heir. But having a woman take the throne for a second reign, and worse yet, one so very young, could be seen as a sign of weakness to many of the other nations surrounding Liberl. And that may actually have been the spark that led to Richard starting this whole coup in the first place. Basically, Richard wishes to use Dunnan both because he's a man, which would provide much more perceived security against other nations, and because he would be easier to manipulate from behind the scenes, allowing the military more power in the process. As fiendish as his means are, in Richard's mind at least, he believes he's doing what's best to protect the nation, though clearly that's a load of bullshit. Regardless, the Queen's request is, as you might expect, to rescue her granddaughter, along with all the others imprisoned by Richard, so that she can finally stand up to him as the still true monarch of Liberl. And while we work on that, the Queen promises that she'll also look more into this Black Orbment and try to ascertain what exactly its purpose is in Colonel Richard's plan. So, with the wind at your back and your heads held high, you leave the Queen's chambers with a new purpose. You change into your maid uniforms, make your way back to Hilda's room, bump into a very drunk Duke Dunnan, who makes some very not subtle passes at Estelle, and finally leave the maid chambers in your regular clothes, all set for your next objective. But it's still very late and you can't exactly just leave, so you head back to your room to get a night's sleep and prepare for the coming morrow. However, as you make your way back there, a familiar voice calls out to you, and you're confronted once again by Captain Amalthea, this time flanked by a pair of soldiers. She begins to interrogate you, and even reveals that she's been keeping tabs on your movements. Notably, she claims that you've been spotting entering and exiting the maid's chambers a number of times this evening. Although I don't think they saw you dressed as maids, they just saw you in regular clothing. Now, why on earth would a pair of contestant winners be visiting the maid chambers on a regular basis? And why would they be skulking around the castle this late at night? Why, perhaps it would be best if these little contest winners were brought in for a little creative questioning. But before any of that can come to fruition, Zin appears behind Amalthea, and he appears to be pretty drunk. Zin exclaims that he's been sending the two of us all over the place to find some good food to go with all this booze he's been having, and asks if we've turned up anything, which in turn gives us the perfect excuse for why we were entering the maid chambers. Oh no, we were looking to see if they knew where any good food for Zin was. Amalthea, with no real recourse and slightly off put by the very forwardly drunk Zin, has no option but to let you go, allowing the three of you to return to your room. There, Zin reveals that he was, of course, just acting drunk to give you an alibi. He's actually perfectly sober. However, perhaps more surprisingly, Zin reveals that he knew the entire time that you were going to meet with the Queen. When you question on how he could possibly know that, Zin pulls out a letter from his pocket. Reading it, you find out that this is basically a request from Cassius of Zin to come help out in Liberal while he's out of the country doing something in Erebonia. Basically, he told Zin to enter the tournament in order to look like a random traveler, while in the background he helped out with the protection of Liberal. And you know, maybe bump into his kids and help them out if he has the chance. Well, it's kind of annoying that Zin was able to keep this secret the entire time, but I guess we were keeping secrets from him too, so So you fill in Zin on everything that happened and the Queen's request, to which of course Zin is only too happy to help. So, after a night's rest, the three of you head back to the Bracer Guild to fill in the receptionist about everything and start making plans about how we're gonna go about rescuing Princess Claudia. The receptionist suggests that this isn't really just a three-bracer job. We are kind of preparing to go into battle with the literal army here, even if we do have the Queen's permission to do so. So he suggests we should get the other bracers involved who are here, namely Kurt, Grant, Karna, and Annalise. So you run around town telling all the other bracers to meet you at HQ so you can fill them in on everything. But when you arrive at Kurt's location, something rather odd happens. When you bring up the Black Orbment in your abridged retelling of everything that's gone down, he suddenly drops to the ground clutching his head and shrieking. Zin gives him a, healing punch, and that causes Kurt to finally calm down. Apparently, Kurt was suffering from a case of amnesia. Perhaps someone was tampering with his mind. Gee, that sure seems to be going around a lot now, doesn't it? But importantly, he has regained some of his memories. Notably that just before he lost them, he had been hired to get that Black Orbment from the Intelligence Division. And, well... You'll never guess who actually hired him. Yes, so it turns out that mysterious K that wrote the letter to Cassius about Professor Russell was in fact Kurt. Well, it's an interesting tidbit and just raises further questions on why people keep suddenly coming down with a serious case of forget-me-nows, but you can't exactly dwell on it. Kurt's memory is still hazy and you've still got a princess to rescue, so it'll have to wait. You round up the last of the bracers, gather in the guild, and finally start planning how we're going to approach this thing. Based on some rumors and the way the army has been acting, it's pretty much guaranteed that the princess is being held in a villa situated on the outskirts of Grancell, one that used to belong to the Queen but has been taken over by the Intelligence Division for anti-terrorism reasons. But how we actually get in there is going to be another story. A full-on assault seems like our only real option, but we'll have to be clever about it. After a bit of deliberation, you decide that splitting into 4 teams would probably be for the best. One to act as the primary distraction, one to act as an ambush aiding in that initial distraction, one to act as the actual team breaking out the princess, and one final distraction team that goes with the main team to cause some chaos in the actual villa itself. However, we're not exactly that high on manpower right now, and even with the 4 extra bracers, there's no way we could pull off that many teams. But, well, it turns out that's okay, because who should show up out of the blue but Lieutenant Schwarz, who apparently the Queen had contacted directly somehow in order to get her to help in the operation. Neat! With the Royal Guardsmen on your side, you should have more than enough manpower to break in and rescue the princess. So you head to the villa as night falls and set your plan into motion. Lieutenant Schwartz acts as a distraction, the 4 other bracers jump out to act as their support, while you and a couple other Royal Guardsmen sneak into the villa to save the princess. Once inside, the guardsmen accompanying you begin something of a ruckus, drawing a large number of guards away from their positions and granting you a path into the villa itself. Of course, they can't draw away everyone, and you are forced to confront a number of guards on your way in, but at this point you're more than experienced in the art of taking down intelligence goons. After a bunch of rooting around and finally finding the key, you make your way to the most central part of the villa, open the doors, and find the hostages you were looking for. There's quite a few people here, presumably related to the royal family or military in some way. There's also Neil, who apparently got caught while trying to rendezvous with his last informant, and of course, the princess herself. However, she's looking a little more familiar than we might have expected. So yeah, obviously Chloe is the princess, a fact that Joshua realizes right away, and one still takes several minutes to over-the-topically react to. In any event, you get to have a nice little reunion with your old friend, but unfortunately the meeting gets cut short. Into the room burst a couple Intelligence Division soldiers, and they take a young girl hostage, who just so happens to be General Morgan's granddaughter, I guess? Unable to move, lest these monsters kill the poor girl, you're forced to throw down your weapons and surrender. But before you can, it's Shara! Shara coming in from the right corner with the steel chair, oh my god! And who's that behind her? Could it be? It is! It's Olivier! Stone Cold Olivier! So yeah, I guess Shara must have gotten wind of our little endeavor and somehow picked up Olivier on her way over. But it's good to see her again. With all these people showing up, we've almost got the whole band back together, actually. Anyways, with the ruckus finally over and done, and having done your little reunion with Shara, you regroup with your other bracer friends and the Royal Guardsmen. You give the hostages a chance to rest, while all the important people involved gather together to discuss how to go from here. So, the Intelligence Division is 100% alerted to our actions now, and almost certainly will have reinforcements from the other regions on their way, which means our time is limited. But we do have the advantage for now, so how should we proceed? Zin, Olivier, and Lieutenant Schwartz all immediately start suggesting ways to protect the princess, as she is our top priority at the moment. We could hide in a foreign embassy, or even flee to another country, just anywhere to regroup and prepare for a counter-offensive. But Chloe is not on board with that plan, and makes a rather desperate plea, asking if we could go and immediately try and rescue her grandmother, the queen. It's a pretty ballsy move, to say the least. Taking this villa was one thing, but the castle is a heavily guarded fortress. Even the Erebonian Empire was unable to capture it during the war. What chance does a handful of racers have? Well, Chloe produces a map from her pocket which reveals a secret known to very few outside the royal bloodline. It details a secret entrance into the castle via the sewers, which a small party could easily infiltrate, getting behind enemy lines with little effort. It's still obviously a risky venture, but with this bit of information, it just might be enough to turn the tides. So your group come up with a plan. Joshua, Zid, and Olivier will go through the sewers, infiltrate the castle, and open the gates from the inside, thus removing the whole fortress advantage of the enemies. Meanwhile, the Royal Guardsmen and the 4 extra bracers will once again be acting as a diversion, charging the castle gates and drawing as many of the enemy soldiers to their location as they can, which leads into the final part of the plan, which will be headed by Estelle, Chloe, and Shara. Through our taking over the villa, we were able to get our hands on one of the Intelligence Division's small airships, and apparently Chloe at some point learned how to fly one of them. So while the majority of the Intelligence Division's forces will be occupied at the front gates, the 3 of you will land on the hopefully relatively unguarded garden area and quickly rescue the queen before the enemy have a chance to react. It's a bold move to be sure, but the most important part, at least as far as our leading duo is concerned, is that this will be the first time in our entire journey that our star-crossed protagonists will be separated for any meaningful amount of time. Oh, to be young again. Well, after that tearful goodbye, you set the plan in motion, and it's pretty much goes according to plan. Joshua and crew make it through the sewers, sneak into the castle, break into the security room, kick a few really confused guards' asses, and open the gate. The Royal Guards and Bracer Extras storm the castle gates, causing Captain Amalthea to panic, sending the vast majority of her guard to the front to deal with the intruders. Just in time for an airship to appear above her, and out to come our 3 main ladies. Amalthea, clearly pissed at just how thoroughly she's getting bamboozled, gets ready to take you on personally. Ooh, this is gonna be satisfying. Now, there's only a thin line of resistance sitting between you and your goal of rescuing the queen. You deal with the few remaining guards, as well as knocking out Duke Dunnan, who spends a couple minutes proving that he really does have no redeeming qualities whatsoever, before finally entering the queen's chambers, ready to whisk her away and bring an end to Colonel Richard's foolish attempt at a coup. However, as you enter her room, you find that you haven't overcome every obstacle. There's still one last line of defense in place, being Lieutenant Lawrence, the mysterious enigma always lurking behind Richard. You confront Lawrence and demand he release the queen, but obviously he's not budging on that. He begins a long-winded spiel about what it means to rule a nation and how we don't really know what's going on. He even finally removes his helmet to reveal that he's, some guy we've never met before. Alright, well, he's probably the silver-haired guy that saved the orphans back in Ruan. I mean, his hair's kind of ashen blonde, not silver, but I guess the matron made a mistake or something? Regardless, the point is he's still someone we need to take down. And I mean, sure, he's obviously an incredibly skilled fighter, we've seen that firsthand already, but come on, it's 3v1, and Estelle, Shara, and Chloe are all badasses in their own right. There's no way we could possibly lose. I'm sorry. Could you just give me a moment?
きっとポイント回復するなら傷薬と宝玉で瀕死大変仲間を助ける自我絵師の玉と反動
Take that, you ashen-haired glimmerous fop! Even you will fall to my mighty genius! It certainly didn't take multiple tries, and I didn't have to reload an alt-save because all my anti-confusion equipment was on Joshua's team. Well, regardless of whether you beat him or not, it doesn't really matter. Either way, after the battle is done, he still manages to disarm the three of you and go on a long-winded rant about how there are forces at work behind the scenes far greater than anything we've ever witnessed, or some such. With his piece said, Lawrence leaps from the castle walls, presumably heading off to appear in a later installment in the series. Fine, but if he ends up becoming a party member in a later game, I am benching him so goddamn fast. Anyways, the queen is safely in your hands, and it's not too long before your other friends show up as well. After a brief exchanging of information, you realize that there's only really one thing left to do. Now that the castle is ours, and Amalthea and Lawrence have been dealt with in one way or another, the only thing left to do is deal with Richard himself. Lawrence had hinted that Richard had gone underground, which means that the Queen's hunch about him seeking that power source buried beneath Grancell is probably correct. The Queen explains that, like she had said, she ended up doing some research into that black orbment and the power source after her little talk with Estelle and Joshua, and she's starting to think that the thing Richard is seeking is something called the Aureole. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's also known as the Shining Ring, which is basically a super ancient power that was bestowed onto the Earth by God herself. It's a tale which is often passed down through the church and has become something of a myth. But, based on that giant orbital reading underneath the city, and Richard's insistence on finding it, the Queen thinks that this Shining Ring is most likely what he's looking for. The Gospel, or Black Orbment, may be related to it in some way too. Which means, there's only one option left for us. To follow Richard down the pits, into the unknown depths below Grancell, and putting a stop to whatever he has planned for such ancient, godlike power. You make your way down to a small closed-off chamber in the heart of the castle, one that is supposed to be empty, but now is sporting a big ol' elevator. It looks like the Intelligence Division have been doing quite a lot of work here, right under everyone's noses without anyone noticing. It may even be that the entire reason for the coup wasn't so much as to take over political power, but to gain unfettered access to this room and the area below. You try to get the elevator working, only to find that it's been shut down. We would require some sort of orbment technician or something to figure out how to get this working, but where are we gonna find someone like that at this hour, huh? I mean, yeah, obviously we've been working towards this. As if on cue, from the door behind us, appears Professor Russell along with Agate and Tita, meaning we finally have our entire party together again. Woo! After a quick reunion / round of introductions, the professor helps out in repairing the elevator, and the lot of you get on board and head down into the unknown area beneath Grancell. It's a very long trip down. No, not quite. Instead, you arrive in a place unlike anything you've witnessed before. A strange, almost futuristic place, built of some sort of tech far more advanced than anything you've seen before. Although, there are also hints of more modern tech dotted around too, showing just how long the Intelligence Division have been working here. Which ain't good news for us. They've got a hell of a head start. Who knows what Richard is doing down here? Your party actually agree that Estelle and Joshua should take the helm here. After all, they always seem to be at the center of all this. Who better to lead for this final operation? Our leading duo are a little embarrassed by the praise, but take up the role with aplomb. Estelle and Joshua pick their two favoritist companions to accompany them and head into the final dungeon. It's certainly something. Not the most confusing dungeon I've ever had to face, but every other chest you encounter is guarded by these fuckers, who can, unfortunately, interrupt your casting, which makes dealing with groups of enemies way more friggin' annoying. You also run into Amalthea, who, I'm not really sure how she got this far down before us, but whatever. She doesn't really put up much more of a fight than she did the first time you fought her, so You'll leave her unconscious with the rest of your party and make your way through the last half of the dungeon, which is quite long but pretty damn samey, so let's get through it. Before you know it, you stand at the very end and prepare to confront Colonel Richard. Alright, Richard, the gig is up. It doesn't look like the gospel is activated. We can still finish this. Oh, I'm sorry, Joshua, but I'm afraid it is far too late for you to do anything. Too late? What the heck even is this shining ring? The aureole is power beyond anything you could possibly imagine. It was a power so vast it was thought to be just a myth, a legend, but it's real. A God-given power to control the very foundations of this planet. Do you understand what having such a power would mean for Liberal? Liberal? With this power, we no longer need to fear those fools in Erebonia. Our technological superiority has let us maintain sovereignty so far, but that is only fleeting. Soon enough, the other nations will close the gap, and then Liberal will be like a defenseless lamb, surrounded on every side by hungry wolves. That doesn't mean you had to resort to this. We won that war 10 years ago, didn't we? We won that because we had Cassius. The hero of our nation, a man without peer. He and he alone was able to conjure a miracle that won us that war. But he's left us. And it's up to me to discover a new miracle to protect this nation. This is that miracle. Can you not see how it will save us? You know, I think I finally realized something. What are you talking about? You never seemed like a bad guy, Richard. No matter what happened, it never really clicked with me why you were doing such evil things. But I think I get it now. Richard, my father is only one man. He didn't win the war on his own. He had people supporting him. My mother, the Queen, General Morgan, and you, didn't he? My father achieved what he did because he had people to rely on, people to help him. That's the true miracle in all this. I may not be that smart when it comes to a lot of things, but one thing I've realized over my journey is that a peace won by forcing others into cowering at your superior might is no peace at all. It's just another form of oppression. Well said, Estelle. You took the words right out of my mouth. When did that little airheaded student of mine do all that growing up? You truly are your father's daughter, but not everyone can always be so strong. I've come too far at this point to simply throw it all away like that. Then answer me this, Richard. It's a question that's been weighing on my mind for a while now. How did you discover this place? How did a forbidden power hidden away deep beneath the capital, a secret not even the Queen herself knew about? And not only that, you knew where the entrance to this place was. You knew how the Gospel and Aureole were connected. How? I don't have to tell a brat like you anything. No. It's not that you won't tell me. You can't tell me, can you? You have no idea how you got this information, do you? What are you talking about, Joshua? Your memories have been altered, haven't they? It's been happening all over the place. The Sky Bandits, the mayor, Kurt, but you're just the latest victim. You've been following an ideal, even though you haven't got a clue how you got that ideal in the first place. Enough! What does it matter how I got this information? With this power, Liberal will be able to gain the respect it rightfully deserves. I shall be the one to see that brought to fruition, and if I have to wipe out Cassius Bright's progeny to do so, then so be it.
Unbelievable.
Piece of cake.
Well, that was certainly an impressive showing. Too bad it was meaningless. No, were we too late after all, or... huh?
A gospel has been activated. The first barrier surrounding the Aureole has been removed.
Huh? Was that a voice? Richard, what the hell's going on? How the bloody hell should I know? I thought this would just...
Ring barrier keeping Guardians in stasis has been deactivated. All personnel should evacuate the area immediately. I repeat, all personnel should evacuate the area immediately.
Joshua, what exactly does that mean? I've got a bad feeling about this. Oh my fucking god, we're fighting a giant robot. It's okay, we fought, well, I mean, we haven't really fought worse, but with a little can-do spirit and some magic sprinkled in, we can probably pull this off, right? Yeah! Okay, this thing can certainly take a lot of punishment, but at worst it seems to be about on par with us. If we can keep going, we can...
Initiating boss power-up mode.
God damn it! Okay, he's just a bit tougher than before, but that's no reason to panic. I've still got plenty of fight left in me. How about a little fire, Macro?
Initiating fuck you mode.
Oh, come on, really? That wasn't annoying enough already on the mini-bosses. Okay, I just need to play it smart here. Keep myself healed in between turns, sprinkle in a few arts whenever I can. It's slow going, for sure, but we can withstand this. I know we can...
Initiating instant kill mode.
Oh, come on! I call fucking hacks! It's gonna take a miracle to defeat this thing! It's way too goddamn powerful! Did someone say miracle? No, you can't do this to me, game! Ha ha! Take that, fiend! The mighty Cassius falls to no robot! Go, my children! Get the finishing blow! I've somehow completely refilled your energy bars! But you... fine. Wow! Very impressive, you two. I mean, you've still got a lot of room to improve, but I'll give you a passing grade this time. Dad? Wait, but where in the name of Eidos have you even been? Estelle, Joshua, I'm home. Sorry it's taken me so long. A lot of things happened. Don't give me that right now. What the heck are you even doing here? What indeed. Perhaps I just wanted to see the ending with my own eyes. You certainly haven't changed one bit, Dad. Joshua, my boy! Looks like you've grown a little since I last saw you. Looking after Estelle hasn't been too hard, has it? Excuse me? Depends on the day, really. But To be honest, she's been looking out a lot for me too. Good. Looks like the two of you got to experience a truly worthwhile journey while I was away. It's good to see you as well, Shara. Oh, right. Guess I should deal with this first before I continue our little reunion. I put so many precautions in place. Made sure Morgan and Sid wouldn't dare oppose me. And yet you make one appearance and everything I accomplish is undone. Oh please, Estelle and Joshua could have easily handled this without me. I just helped the finale arrive a little bit quicker. No, you're wrong. You were a hero. Without you to guide it, Liberal was lost. What was I supposed to do without... After all we went through together, Richard, I can't believe you would behave so childishly. Despite all your scheming, did you never once think about standing on your own 2 feet? I thought you were better than this. That's why I left, because I thought I could leave Liberal in your care. Colonel, I'm no hero. I'm just a man who was in the right place at the right time, with the right people to support me. I want you to think long and hard about why you failed, Richard. Lord knows you'll have the time now. And with that, it's over. The villain was defeated, your father found. All that's left now is to wrap up all those loose ends, right? And so, we cut to a few days later, as the city of Grancell prepares to celebrate the Queen's birthday. A citywide celebration ensues as the Queen, after a long absence, is finally able to return to her usual public self. What's more, due to your spectacular deeds, Estelle and Joshua receive their recommendation from the guild in Grancell, meaning, at last, they are truly bracers proper. Cassius also takes this opportunity to tell you and the rest of the bracers that he plans on returning to the military. With Richard currently under arrest, the military needs someone to fill in the power vacuum he left behind, and the Queen personally requested Cassius take up the role. With Estelle and Joshua reaching full bracer status, he feels there's no need to be around to look after his children anymore. Not that he ever did. Sorry, I'll stop that. This of course means that our protagonists will once again be separated from their father, but it's not too bad. It's not like he'll be that far away, and at least they actually know where he is this time. You have a little talk with Cassius before he has to head into his war meeting, and you talk about what still remains in the future for you. While we've stopped the coup itself, there's still a lot of unanswered questions hanging in the air. What exactly is this shining ring? We just kind of know it's powerful, but that's about it. Also, what was up with Richard having his memory messed with? Where did he get all this info on the gospel and everything underground? There's still plenty of mystery hanging in the air. However, Cassius does explain that they did figure out one thing: where the black orbment came from. Apparently, Richard got the black orbment from Lieutenant Lawrence before Kurt got his hands on it and it made its way to us. Which means, based on that whole self-important speech Lawrence gave to us, he's probably a lot more intimately involved in this than we first thought. Though who the man actually is still completely shrouded in mystery. Well, it's a good thing Estelle at least managed to get a good look at his face when they fought, as she describes his youngish look, ash-brown hair, and piercing eyes. Joshua seems to perk up at this description. Perhaps this Lawrence is someone from his past, but as always, he doesn't really let on much more than that. In any case, Cassius takes his leave, and you two decide to spend the day taking in the town, enjoying the celebration for the Queen, and meeting up with old friends. You wander around and bump into a bunch of familiar faces that you've met over your long journey. Chloe is traveling around with the headmaster and several students from the school. Tita's spending time with her grandpa, enjoying no longer having to be on the run. Zin and Adgate are getting acquainted, the two of them only tangentially knowing each other but respecting the other's fighting prowess. Shara's out shopping with some of the other bracers. Olivier is, acting slightly more mysterious than usual, but I guess he seems happy. And outside of your party members, you bump into a bunch of other characters that you know, such as the mayors, Lieutenant Schwartz, General Morgan, Neil and Dorothy, am I forgetting anyone? Nah, I'm pretty sure that's everyone we met. Anyways, after a long day of walking, Estelle and Joshua find a quiet bench to relax on for a bit. And that's when Estelle remembers a certain promise the two of them made. One to spill everything to one another once all their problems have been solved. Oh my god, she has to tell Joshua she likes him. In a fit of embarrassment, Estelle leaps to her feet, saying she'll go get some ice cream to help them cool off. Mostly to help herself cool off so that she can get her thoughts straight. And with that, she rushes off trying to maintain as much dignity as possible, leaving Joshua all alone. Except for, he isn't alone, is he?
Oh, hello, Joshua.
You?
Whoa, that's a cold stare you're giving me. I heard you guys had gained full bracer status, so I assumed you'd be celebrating or something.
Every time we run into each other, I always get this uneasy feeling whenever you look at me. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, but the more I think about it, the more I realize. Every time someone's memories were altered, you were there, weren't you? Somewhere nearby, investigating some ruin or something. Every single time. Too many times to be just a coincidence. It was you, wasn't it?
My Joshua. Or should I say, Enforcer number 13, the Black Fang.
The Black Fang?
Even with your memories erased, you were still able to work all that out. You truly are in a league of your own.
What the heck did you do to me? Who are you?
It's a shame, you know. I erased those memories of yours out of the kindness of my heart. A little gift from me for all the things you did for me over the years. Well, I suppose it's too late now. How about we give you some of those memories back?
Maybe I, hold out a cone and I scream every time I think about... Oh, audience above, that doesn't even make any sense. Oh, why did I have to promise him I'd tell him everything? I didn't think it would be this difficult. But I've spent almost half an hour deciding what ice cream to get. I can't keep him waiting any longer. All right, Estelle, pick yourself up. You can still do this.
Oh, hey, Estelle. I was wondering where you were. I just bumped into your other partner in crime back there. Congrats on becoming a real bracer.
Oh, hello, Professor Alba. Good to see you. And thanks. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well enough, I guess.
Really? From your tone, I figured something good must have happened. You seem to be a bit more chipper than usual.
Really? I suppose the museum did approve my latest research project, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Wow, that's great to hear. I'm so happy for you, Professor. Anyways, I should be getting back to Joshua with these. I hope everything works out for you.
Cassius Bright's daughter. She may prove to be quite the interesting plaything.
Joshua, sorry I took so long. There were so many flavors, you know, and
Estelle, geez, I was wondering what was taking you so long.
But I guess you're like that sometimes. Yeah, I guess. I kind of lost track of time or something, so...
Hey, before that, Estelle, about what we were talking about before.
Oh, about that,
Well, I was just thinking is all. Now that we're bracers, things are gonna get pretty hectic.
Huh?
I'll probably be sent all over the place dealing with who knows what. But we'll be dealing with all that together, right?
Yeah, of course we will.
So I just thought, why do we have to rush anything? If we have anything we need to say to one another, we can just say it whenever. We can take our time. We have no reason to jump into this immediately. We have all the time in the world.
Joshua, are you hiding?
Huh? You say something?
No, sorry. just thinking out loud. It's nothing. Come on, let's have this ice cream before it starts to melt. And so, with that, the day finally comes to an end. Over the past couple nights, you've been staying at the castle, but tonight will be the last. Starting tomorrow, Estelle, Joshua, Cassius, and Shara will all be returning to their home of Liberal for the first time in a long while. Estelle is bunking with Shara while Joshua is rooming with Cassius, which gives our leading lady a chance to think. About her failed confession attempt, yes, but also about something else. She's always been able to tell when Joshua is lying to her, and well, alarm bells have been ringing in her head all afternoon. She can't quite put her finger on what it is, but something's there. Shara notices Estelle is busy ruminating and decides to tease her a little about Joshua, but Estelle is at a point where she can't really hide her feelings anymore. So she confesses that she has indeed fallen for Joshua. Shara, seeing her young student struggle with all the confusion surrounding her first love, decides to offer what advice she can, and the two share an actually very sweet conversation. Afterwards, Estelle is reinvigorated enough to put her thoughts in order. She tells Shara that she's going out to see Joshua. Not to confess to him, mind you, she's not quite ready to rip that band-aid off yet. No, she's just going to see if she can help in any way, in whatever it is that's got Joshua feeling blue. She's not really sure how much help she'll actually be able to be. Joshua always does seem to be so on top of everything, but the main thing she's learned from this journey so far is that as long as the two of them stick together, they'll be able to work something out. Shara wishes her luck, and Estelle heads off to search for Joshua. After a bit of searching, she finds him alone up on the castle garden, playing his harmonica, something we haven't heard him do for quite a while. As she walks up quietly behind him, Joshua turns, almost as if he was expecting her to come. And well, he claims he's finally ready to tell Estelle everything. He did promise he was going to tell her about his past after all. Estelle is surprised that he would just come out like this, but of course, he's ready to listen. And so, we get to hear Joshua's story. Once upon a time, there was a young boy with no particularly special qualities. He was timid and unimpressive, but he had people who he cared about and people who cared about him. So, despite his unimpressiveness, he was happy. But one day, something terrible happened, and the boy's heart was broken. The only thing he could do from that point on was play his harmonica. Everything else seemed to fail him. He turned into a husk of a human being. However, things changed one day when a magician named Weissman appeared at his door, claiming he could repair the boy's broken heart for a price. And so, the boy was handed over to the magician, and after some time, the magician found that he could mold the boy's heart in any way he saw fit. And well, what better use for someone like that than as an assassin? The boy, now fully under the control of the magician, was made to kill again and again. Every day for 2 long years, he did nothing but kill. Soldiers, cabinet ministers, and innocents alike. Sometimes with blades, sometimes with explosions, it didn't matter, as long as he got the kill. He eventually gained some notoriety due to this, being known as the Black Fang, a terrifying name that men throughout the nation came to fear. But then, one day, he was given an order unlike anything he'd been given before, to target a hero. A man who had served under the Queen, who had saved the nation countless times. A man named Cassius Bright. The boy threw everything he had into his mission, tried with all his might to kill Cassius, but found he was no more effective than a weak little lamb trying to stand up to a fully grown wolf. The boy managed to escape from Cassius, but soon found he had nowhere to return. Since Cassius had seen his face, he was now a loose end, one that needed to be cleaned up himself. So, several of the magician's servants appeared, ready to kill the boy. However, he did not die that day, as who should come to his aid but the very man he'd just tried to kill, Cassius Bright. The boy was taken home by Cassius, where he met a girl who would change his life forever. Unsure how to behave around the girl at first, eventually the boy found himself enraptured by the girl. Every day with her felt like a dream. A beautiful dream so good that it couldn't possibly really exist. He knew one day that dream would come to an end.